Hello and welcome to the SpaceChem Tournament 2020 Round 5 results video. Today I've got brookieoz with me,
Hello.
Biggie Mac,
Yep, hi.
and Gigs.
Hello.
And I am Rexkix. Before we go on, I want to thank the tournament hosts, RPO, who's made all the puzzles, 12345 IEEE, who's receiving all our solutions. He's posting the puzzles, he's tabulating the results, he's doing a lot of stuff. And we really appreciate those two because we know they'd rather be playing in the tournament than running the tournament, but they run it so we can play. And we really appreciate their sacrifice. So thank you guys. Also, we've got some really cool charts. Brookie made them. We're going to call them the nuclear math flow charts. Sounds really important. Also known as the breakdown. And Brookie worked really hard on these graphs, so I hope you like them.
Yeah, I spent somewhere around like 20 hours this past week working on them all. So yeah.
I think that's actually low, but Brookie's the one who did them. So thank you, Brookie.
That's time we are taking away from your week 6 solution.
Strategic.
Yeah, I didn't really start on my week 6 thing until today, so
And for the first time ever in a SpaceChem tournament, we have something new. We have teams. Let's introduce the teams. First team is Team 87. It's got Gigs, who's here, and Rezunes. Gigs, why don't you explain the team name?
So yeah, it's pretty simple. 87 is the number of the francium element, and Rezunes and I are both French, so we thought it would be a fitting name for our team.
Okay. Next team. Team Random Element is me. It's Chaboka and me. The name Random Element comes from, yes, an old Star Trek episode. It's the City on the Edge of Forever, and Bones was declared to be the random element in a time travel episode. And the final team is Lazy and Logggy, who's made up of Lazy Comet and Gigi Gall. And I asked them why they named their team that. Apparently, Lazy goes with Lazy Comet, and Gigi Gall is backwards Logggy, or sort of. But Lazy, because the lazy programmer makes a better, smaller, more efficient thing because he's lazy, and it works just the same. And Logggy is a word which I had to look up. It means essentially slow. You can be loggy from drinking too much. And that's their team name. Before we look at the solutions, let's look at the puzzle. The puzzle is called Mundanifier, and Brookie's going to explain it to us.
Yeah, so the puzzle is called Mundanifier because SpaceChem introduces fictional elements towards the end of the game, and these are they're notated as theta, omega, sigma, and delta. So we call them in the community, we call them the Greek elements because they're all notated with Greek capital letters instead. And in the game code, they're actually coded as elements 200 to 203. In order of increasing atomic weight, it is theta, omega, sigma, and then delta. Why is it called Mundanifier? Well, the elements carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen are elements 6, 7, and 8. So the analog to that in Greek elements is, well, omega is 201, sigma is 202, and delta is 203. So there's there's kind of like a similarity where the differences between the atomic numbers are increments of 1. The only difference is, about 195-ish or so. And essentially the whole puzzle is it is a cycles optimization puzzle where you're trying to make a bunch of ethanolamine as quickly as you can, given your pseudo-ethanolamine input. Now, the game actually doesn't tell you about this because splitting isn't actually in the main campaign. Splitting actually was introduced in ResNet, and essentially you can take an atom and divide by 2. We've seen this back in round 1, but splitting a Greek atom gives you, well, you can do that. Firstly, we'll see one solution that from a person who didn't realize they could do this, but you can actually split a Greek element down to elements around 100 to 102, and this means that you can actually make more than one output per input by essentially using your Greek elements and just splitting it all the way down to create a whole bunch of extra like atomic mass units and making your own, making your outputs with that. The math, by the way, if you add up all the atoms in ethanolamine, it comes out to 34, and if you add up all the atomic mass units for the input, it ends up being 814. Now, if you really want to do the math, that means that you can make almost 24. It's actually 23.94-ish outputs per input. So if you're given infinite processing power, theoretically, yes, you could get this down to 200 cycles or so. Well, because the first input actually comes on cycle 1, it's more like 100 cycles plus latency. But that's very, very unrealistic. But as a proof of concept, yeah, you could make all your outputs using just 2 inputs. Therefore, there's a huge breadth of solution space, and there's a huge number of ways that you can go about approaching this puzzle.
You might mention also the input rate. You did, but how it's different.
So to encourage more people to split down to really make as much use of the input as possible, the input rate. So normally your production input rates are limited to 10 cycles per input, but for this week, the input rate is actually 100 cycles per input. The metric for this puzzle is cycles, but there's actually also a penalty of 400 cycles for every reactor you use above 2 reactors. This makes it so that you have to really do a lot of math to kind of determine at what point is just inputting another input and just starting all over with a fresh input. At what point does that outweigh bringing another reactor in and processing more of your previous input? As we'll see, the optimum balance, you have to essentially make a chart for it, but there is somewhere around, if you could make 4 outputs per input at input speed, that'll get you around 1,000 cycles. If you do 3, it'll get you around 1,400. So it's an interesting balance. If you use 2, it's 2,000. If you only make 1 out of every input, it's 4,000. So if every reactor you bring in can save you more than 400 cycles, then overall it should be worth using another reactor.
Okay. Thank you, Brookie.
Speaking of reactors, the reactors available here are pretty special. There's either a super fission reactor, which, you can show it, has 4 splitters, 4 bonders, a sensor, but yeah, this isn't a standard nuclear reactor because there's no fusion. So you can only get either a fission or fusion reactor.
Okay.
Oh, and one more note about the storage tank. So about halfway through the week, we noticed that if you actually stuck a storage tank in the middle of a pipe, that actually will shuttle an atom across that area faster than a straight pipe does. In fact, the storage pipe is like about 4 units from start to finish, and you can see right here that it just kind of teleports over. So it actually saves you about 3 cycles in latency if you had a storage tank. And halfway through the week, the tournament organizer decided that this is kind of ridiculous. We don't want people to like be exploiting this just because. So they added a 3-cycle storage tank penalty. So using a storage tank just for latency saving did not actually help you, which is why some solutions don't have storage tanks, even when using a storage tank would cut their cycles by 3.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That's really interesting. First solution is by Binky, and Biggie is going to explain this one. So let's go, Biggie.
Yeah, so we're looking here at the nuclear math flowchart for Binky's solution, which is about the simplest approach you can envision for this puzzle. Binky apparently did not realize that you could split Greeks until far later into the week and didn't design anything around that. So all of the Greek elements and their 807 combined atomic waste, or atomic mass, becomes waste, which means that from each input, Binky receives just the 7 hydrogen. And the 7 atomic mass, you need at least 5 inputs to create an output for the first time. And Binky does just that. Every input is a fifth of an output, which means that Binky needs 200 inputs to complete the puzzle. Final input arrives on 19,900, which means 41 latency cycles later, Binky has produced their 40th output, but that is quite slow as far as this puzzle goes. Now, in terms of the process, it's pretty dirt simple. The hydrogens all fuse into the carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen you need for this. 1 hydrogen becomes waste because there's only 34 mass units in the output and 35 hydrogens from the fifth input. You could choose to carry over, but that won't even bring you another output before 34 times in, and counting to that is awkward. So Binky just chose to fuse a waste ball with the extra hydrogen. And yeah, let's look at the solution now. Beautiful pipe signature Binky. There is, if you see, it's not just the mess of pipes. There's an outline of a B-I-N-K-Y. And since that's just the waste pipe delivering the Greek elements to the recycler, it does not slow Binky down at all in terms of the actual speed of the solution, because it's only the short path from input directly to the output that matters.
Okay, let's watch this thing start. And let's dive
So
into...
the
Go
inputs
ahead.
with their giant shape do provide the hydrogen pretty easily. You just debond in that 4-bonder pattern and then drop the rest into the output. But now this reactor is going to spend the rest of the time waiting on input alpha because of the slow input rate. And the 100 cycles per input restriction is really here to design, or to encourage you to have more outputs per input than 1/5.
Okay, well, let's
Here
go
we see that naive 1/5 approach, and it does work.
And let's take a look at the next reactor.
The hydrogens are fed in. The annotation on the left does show you that when it is the singleton hydrogen, it appears on the top middle right, and when it is the pair hydrogen, they appear bonded on the right. And then there's just a sensing logic here to determine how far to fuse those hydrogens before they get to be part of the output. I'm not going to go too deep into the actual process here because the solution is not exemplary of the desired approach to this problem, but it does very successfully create the output eventually.
And here we go. We're getting our oxygen core. And we're going to add some hydrogen around it. And there's
That
one
extra hydrogen taken down to the bottom is the waste ball.
Okay.
As we run the solution faster, you can see that that fuser is going to accumulate all the way up to element 40.
And we'll watch another output be made. And one more, we'll watch the hydrogen getting added in the end slowly.
So as you can see from the fact that it's 19,941 for the cycle count, the last of the 5 inputs needed to finish the output is added fully within 41 cycles of spawning. And that's because that output is all the hydrogen, which is very quick. It doesn't require any fusion, and it's in a position that is almost as convenient as possible for getting to the output.
Okay, and here's our helium waste for 2 outputs so far with the extra hydrogen. And let's let it run to completion. Oh gosh, 3 speed is slow. Here's
It's
4
worth
speed.
4 speed here, so just let it all fly by. Yep.
Okay. And as noted, Binky has a cycle time of 19,941. He had no storage tanks for a metric of 19,941 and a score of 0.665. Next solution is by lilkcough. And Brookie's going to first talk about these charts because they're, like I said, his work and they're a thing of beauty. Go ahead, Brookie.
Right. So as we've seen in the previous chart, most of these charts are, well, sort of simple in that you can probably take a look through how the atoms are split and all that. This chart is a little bit special. First thing to note is that there's a dotted line, not a dashed line, but a dotted line to the top, at the top, slightly to the right. Now, the reason why I had to use this is that between the left and right side of the top area, it's actually 2 different reactors. However, the way that lilkcough approached the solution is a little bit strange because the splitting down from the nobelium, metallivium, fermium down the chain of antimony, tin, iron, magnesium, all the way down to aluminum. It's actually split. The work here is split across the 2 different reactors. Like, for example, the first reactor will split nobelium into the second reactor, and the second reactor will split it all the way down to aluminum. But then the next thing that the first reactor brings over is the antimony or tin. So the first reactor does some of the work. The second reactor also does some of the work, and I couldn't really figure out a way to elegantly express this using just the dashed lines. So that's why I use the dotted lines. It's work that's shared between 2 different reactors. So that's why this chart is unique in a way. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that lilkcough actually normalizes his outputs to aluminum. So every input he creates 16 aluminum, and he actually needs 3 aluminums per output. He trashes the rest of the atomic mass that comes in. So that's why you'll see fractions in the arrows. It's because these charts are actually normalized to 1 input each. And when it comes to that, that means that you're going to have things like 32/3 or 16/3 showing up because, well, you've got 16 aluminum coming in, and you only get 1 output every 3 aluminums. So that's where that comes from.
Before you get in, let's go talk about the structure. Look at the legend and look at the upper right corner. Why don't you explain that to us, Brookie?
Oh, right. So I put some stats on right below the name. So, for example, I always take a look through how many outputs that every solution is making per input, and that's how I get the output to input ratio. For lilkcough, as explained earlier, it's 16:3 because of the aluminum. And also, I like to give at least some kind of rudimentary estimate of how many cycles does it take to create every output. Sometimes this is regular. So lilkcough's is one that is like constantly pumping out a ethanolamine every 208 cycles. It's very consistent. Sometimes it's not as regular. We'll see that in future solutions.
Okay, and the legend, Brookie? The colors of the arrows.
Right. So the arrow on the legend is pretty self-explanatory. I use the dark blue arrow to indicate when you split an atom. In SpaceChem, if it's an odd number, it will split into the heavy and a light element. So, for example, element 101 will split to 51 on the left side and 50 on the right side. I use the dark blue arrow to indicate the heavy of the 2, and I use the light blue arrow to indicate the lighter of the 2. If it's an even number and it splits both into the same element, so for example, carbon down to lithium, which is 6-3, then I just use the light arrow to indicate that both have split down to this. The red arrow indicates fusion, which is just adding together. So there's no need for like a distinction between heavy and light splitting. It's just you just add the numbers together. And lastly, the black arrow is indicates it indicates moving an atom over to something. So, for example, on the right side here, you can see like tin, manganese, and aluminum and magnesium moving into the waste. So that's just all like exited out of that reactor and directly goes into waste. And it also indicates bonding. So essentially, it's if you're trying to bond all the outputs, it's just it's a black arrow to indicate that. So one of the things that I would want to note is this is primarily a nuclear math flowchart, which means that it does not actually it doesn't do a very good job of showing how every output is made in like a bond or structural type of view. I try my best to, like, for example, if a hydrogen is preserved and it's like moved through reactors, I will kind of like have an arrow go through a dashed line. But in general, it doesn't show that very well.
Okay. And as Brookie sort of implied, the heavy dashed lines are reactor boundaries. The input and the output are the square box and the hexagonal box. And the circles are things that are made in the process of making the thing. So let's go take a look at the actual solution. And here it is. And before we go on, I'm going to show something behind this note. It's been implied. In the lower right corner, we have a recycler. This takes any waste and just gets rid of it. So you don't have to make a balanced reactor. You can get rid of stuff you don't want, although it costs you a reactor's output. So let's go put this note back where it was, and let's go explain this this solution.
Right, so this is a lilkcough solution. It's the first one we see that solves the level in the intended spirit, meaning that it actually splits the Greek elements and uses that to make the ethanolamine. So what we see in this first reactor is the input, the hydrogen already present in the input gets recycled straight away, and all Greek elements will be split down to aluminum, and all fission product will go into the second reactor. So here we had the first set of Greeks split to aluminum, and here's the second set of Greeks, and you end up with 4 aluminums in a little box, and this gets recycled.
Let's take a look at the second reactor.
Yeah, this is the second reactor. So it grabs every fission product from the first and it splits them down to carbon and nitrogen. You're always going to end up with nitrogen and carbon the way this works. And you can see that this is actually a timed reactor. Blue is on a timing loop, and yeah, every split, the light split is tested against the sensor, and if it's a carbon, that means that red is holding a nitrogen, and so both will get output and sent further down the line to assembly.
Okay.
We see we see a very common idea here, which is to use aluminum to split it, and that gets you N plus C, which is half of the core of ethanolamine.
Okay, let's go take a look at the next reactor, which I believe, let's go to, follow this pipe around, I'm sorry. This
the one at the top. No, it's the pipe at the top that goes through 2 storage tanks, or 3, and so yeah, you end up in the one you were just hovering over.
Okay.
So this third reactor grabs one of the nitrogen carbon that are bonded and passes it to the final reactor. and the other N plus C pair is split down to hydrogen all the way, which is what blue is doing now. So the hydrogen will get sent to reactor 4 via output omega, and nitrogen and carbon will go into reactor 5 straight away. This is reactor 4. All it does is pass around hydrogens and to output them on a single square to make final assembly easier. And then some of the hydrogens are in excess, and so they're recycled straight away. Blue is on a recycling loop, and red is on a moving atoms around loop.
Okay, let's go take a look at the final reactor. This does the assembly.
Yeah, this is the final assembly. Red is going to grab either a carbon or a nitrogen, just bond 2 hydrogens to it with this neat little rotate loop. And so when you've got all the four core atoms for ethanolamine, the sensor will get triggered, and you fuse 1 hydrogen into the nitrogen to make the oxygen. So this is also a very common trick that we will see in nearly all the solutions, I think. So this is a lilkcough solution. There are very good ideas in it, mainly to use aluminum to get nitrogen and carbon. It does use 5 reactors, so it's going to incur a high penalty in the metric, and also it is slow because reactor 5 that we've just seen spends a lot of time waiting for hydrogen to come.
Okay, well, let's let it run to completion. Oh, that's 3 speed. Let's let it run at 4. Okay. Now, lilkcough's solution runs at 8,453 cycles. He had 3 storage tanks, giving him a metric of 9,662, and a score of 1.464, which is 0.799 better than the previous solution. That's a decent jump. Any jump that's close to a single point is pretty damn good. And some of these, as you can see, will have a very small jump between the previous solution. So those are interesting, and the big ones are interesting too. So there's the lilkcough solution.
And maybe show something educative,
Okay.
I guess, in this solution. In reactor 4, this one. You see that both loops have a sink, but they're the same loop length, so you really shouldn't need sinks. The reason there are sinks in this is that the first input is going to lag a lot, so you have a lot of delay, and that could cause the Waldos to go out of syncs. So there's, if you want to save symbols, there's an easy way to remove those sinks. In this particular case, you can just remove those, and it still works because it's not particularly precise in the timing. But if you have something that is actually precise, the way this would work is that you stop the reaction, you put a pause symbol just after input alpha, and yeah, you just hit 4, so you pause straight away. And you take note of where the blue Waldo is and where it should be if there was a sink. So it should be 3 squares further along the path. So you can just move the blue star at 1, 2, 3 squares. And yeah, that way it's synced without using the actual symbols.
As you see, and they are synced up. So let's get rid of it. And let's go 2 speed. And we can see that they are synced up.
Always synced.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for that. And here we go. Let's go fast again. Get back to the results screen. And thank you very much, Gigs. And thank you, lilkcough. Next solutions by Bavarium, and Brookie's going to explain it to us.
Right, so this is Bavarium's nuclear math flowchart, and this is pretty much about as simple as you can get with splitting down the Greeks. Essentially, what bavarium does is that he just splits everything down to aluminum, which splits down to 2 nitrogens and 2 carbons. He doesn't make any hydrogen at all, actually. He takes all the hydrogen from the pseudoethanolamine input and uses most of it to make the output, but he does take one of it into one hydrogen and fuses it into the oxygen or into the nitrogen to make the oxygen for the output. So because of this, he actually has a 7-to-8 output to input ratio because he needs 8 hydrogens to make every output because of the aforementioned fuse. But he only gets 7 hydrogens per input. So that's where that comes from. This comes out to an average of 191 cycles per output. That's because it's not actually running at input speed, and we'll talk about that later.
Okay, well, let's go take a look at the solution itself. Here we go.
Right, so this solution doesn't run at input speed. Upon looking at this first reactor, you can see there's some pretty poor placement of bonders that requires blue to move all the hydrogens over one by one. You can actually very easily speed this up and improve the solution a lot if you put the bonders over the omega output, so you can debond an output very quickly instead of having blue run through so many loops to, well, move all the hydrogens over. The second problem, the second problem is that when you get to the second reactor is actually kind of slow as well. You could improve the speed of this reactor by moving the input all the way over to the psi output and then have red run through a whole bunch of, like, a predetermined number of splits and fuses, because every time you split down a Greek atom to nitrogen and carbon, your number of splits is actually going to be the same. This, just having these 2 improvements would speed this solution up a lot from probably bringing it up to input speed, which would save several thousand cycles for this solution. Bavarium's last reactor just bonds all the pieces together, does the fusion, and makes the output.
Let's go take a look. Three-quarters. Here's the rest. Let's go watch it again.
Yeah. So, as mentioned before, all of the hydrogens that are coming in are all originally present already on the pseudoethanolamine. So, because of that, he's going to be building up some waste in his pipes, actually. The pipe that goes from his first to the second reactor and then the third reactor, once you run it for some time, you'll see that it starts building up some Greek elements in the pipe preceding the second reactor, and also he has a little bit of elements building up before the third reactor as well. This is all because he doesn't have enough hydrogen because of the 7-to-8 input to output ratio.
And here it is. It's run to completion. He gets a cycle count of 7727 with no storage tanks, but 4 reactors. Is it 4 or 5? 4.
It's 3.
3.
3. There you go. Learn to count, Rexy. 3 reactors for a metric of 8,127 and a score of 1.815 or 0.350 better than the previous solution. Next solution is by CursedFlames, and Binky's going to explain it. Go ahead, Binky.
Yep. So CursedFlames is our first 1-to-1 input to output ratio, but they do use 6 reactors, which penalizes them pretty harshly and brings the metric up over 5,500. So let's see how they did a 1-to-1 ratio. Now, of course, to make ethanolamine, you will need the 7 hydrogens, and you will need to make oxygen by some method. Now, there's the obvious way of making an 8th hydrogen and fusing it into some of the easy-to-get carbon and nitrogen from aluminum splitting. CursedFlames decided to do the hard way of generating oxygen instead by fusing aluminum and tin to europium and finding a split path from europium which produces oxygen as one of its splitties, one of the heavy splits. I do commend the effort to go through to make this all work, but it did have to occur over the course of 6 reactors. If you follow the diagram, you can see the 2 green arrows just use a sensor sort to determine whether the tin or antimony is being passed along to the next reactor. The main unique aspect of the solution is the pair of red arrows, aluminum and tin combining to europium. That is, europium is only seen in this solution among all of the ones that are submitted for this week.
Okay.
And that europium is a source of oxygen, which allows them to get 1 output per input without creating any hydrogen. They only use the hydrogens from the original input.
Well, let's go take a look at the solution. Here we go. Let's get it running. Take a look at reactor 1.
With 6 reactors, there's going to be a lot of different processes going on that were probably best handled just by the chart. But we can watch in their 3rd reactor, the fusion reactor, how the europium is created. It doesn't necessarily paint the full picture because you can only watch one reactor at a time, or you're on the overworld view where everything is pretty zoomed out. But you see first that they are stripping off the hydrogen. Those are the only hydrogens the solution is going to handle. Those will be the hydrogens that go onto the 1 output made from this input, and then the rest is converted into a tall Greek stack. And that tall Greek stack gets backed up because the rest of the reactors can't process it very quickly.
Okay, there's
if you go out to the overworld, I think it doesn't even take 1 output before the Greek stack becomes pretty noticeable, and that long ziggy-zaggy pipe between reactors 1 and the one in the top left.
Let's go take a look at this one now.
Yeah, this is another splitter reactor that is doing some sort of binary counting and determining based on the outputs whether it's going to drop tin or antimony, and antimony is always going to go into the recycler.
Okay. And let's go out. Where are we going next? This one?
Yep. This is yet another fission reactor that is producing from that tin a bunch of aluminum and other byproducts. I suppose it does pass off a tin and an aluminum so that the europium reactor can be fed the correct pair.
Okay, let's go take a look at it.
By the time they reach aluminum, they're in position to make nitrogen and carbon, which is the bulk of the core. The only other question is how you make oxygen, and instead of using a hydrogen into a nitrogen to make oxygen, they take it as a split product of europium, which is produced by this reactor, which is strangely double pumped, and I don't quite follow why that is.
Okay, well, let's go here and let's take a look at this is our output reactor. Let's go take a look here. It's the one that's taking the europium and the carbon.
Yeah, this reactor is just responsible for creating a block of carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. And what's interesting is that this is a reactor where they're very clearly taking into account the fact that SpaceChem will take the same position within the 4x4 for your outputs as they were input, and as for your inputs as they were output. By building it in the very topmost corner, the reactor that receives this will receive it in the top corner of that zone, which when it's in the bottom left is closer to the middle and is a more convenient place for assembly.
Okay, let's go take a look at the assembly reactor. Here we go.
Now it just adds the hydrogen all back on that came from that very first reactor. That is a hydrogen chain that goes straight from 1 to 1, or from 1 to 6. But yeah, I think this might be the only solution to do the assembly in a splitter reactor.
That's right.
Because of the fact that he's getting oxygen from that europium cascade instead of from fusion.
Let me correct you. This is a fusion reactor. I can see the fusion instruction here.
Oh, this is fusion.
But it didn't have to because he's not using any nuclear function here.
Yeah, is there a fuse instruction? Is that a completely wasted instruction?
Where is it?
You said you saw one. I can't tell the
resolution. No. I see the fuse in the instruction set.
Oh, in the instruction tray. I see. That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, it could have been done equivalently in a splitter reactor. I just didn't quite pay attention to what type of nuclear process was going on.
Yeah. And let's go take a look at the overworld.
Yeah, you can see right now that the pipe between 1 and 2 is backed up pretty heavily with those Greek stacks.
Oh, here's that.
And that's just because the hydrogen is the real bottleneck here, and that's the reason that this runs at 1-to-1.
Okay. And let's run it a little faster. And 3
I'd like to note that there is a minor inaccuracy in the nuclear math flowchart.
Here we go.
I have the magnesium at the top left-ish splitting directly into the 5th reactor, into the carbon. That actually goes over into the very bottom area. It's transported into that reactor first before it goes into the last reactor.
No, but it's just carried, right? It doesn't have any
It's only carried,
process.
yeah. But it's just a minor problem.
Oh,
minor inaccuracy.
The chart looks cleaner because it doesn't have to cross 3 more dotted lines to get to where it's supposed to be.
Yep.
Well, let's go back. Oh, looky, we're just finishing up. Let's go take a look at that assembly reactor going. Oops, clicking in the wrong place. Well, too late. There it is. Okay, CursedFlames gets a cycle count of 3991. It had no storage tanks, but had 6 reactors for a metric of 5591. And a score of...
the 3991 reflects the fact that you're reliant on 40 inputs, the final of which comes on cycle 3900, in order to be able to complete this puzzle if you have a 1-to-1 ratio.
Yeah. He gets a score of 2.646, or nearly 1 point better than the predecessor. So that's CursedFlame solution. Nicely done, CursedFlame. Very interesting. Next solution's by RPO. He's our tournament host. So he's going to get no score at all. But he's got a solution, so let's go take a look at it.
Right, so RP0 or RPO has a probably another one of the really simple solutions, really straightforward solutions, where he splits things down to aluminum and then splits that down to, well, interestingly, nitrogen. He actually trashes all of his carbons that he gets, and to compensate for this, he's actually, I believe, the only solution that makes an extensive amount of beryllium and fuses back up from beryllium to make his nitrogen and carbon for the output. He has a very interesting reactor where he splits, where he takes lithium and splits that into. Actually, only splits some of the lithium. He outputs 2 of the lithium directly over, and then he will output 2 heliums and then 2 hydrogens. It's very unique, and we'll take a look at what all this accomplishes once we get to it.
Here we go. We're getting to it.
Yeah, so his first reactor is very interesting in how it uses a single split command to split 4 atoms at once. Very cool. He does this all the way down to nitrogen, and that gets given over to the second reactor.
Okay, let's go take a look at this one more time, because we kind of missed it a little bit. Here we are. There's our one split command. And let's get it to our second reactor now.
Right, so the second reactor essentially takes each amine radical, I guess. It's NH2. It rearranges it so it's always like a straight, and then it splits it once to deposit lithium into the top output, and then gives all the beryllium stuff to the bottom output.
Okay. Let's go take a look at reactor 3.
Reactor 3 is a little bit strange. Essentially, it will give it outputs at the top a sequence of exactly this. It goes lithium, 2 heliums, lithium, and then 2 hydrogens. This will come important later.
Let's see later.
So this reactor bonds all of the berylliums together and in a backbone to make the output. Now, why did I ask you to take note of the previous sequence? Well, lithium plus beryllium is 7, or nitrogen. Beryllium plus helium is going to be 6, or carbon. And then another, that repeats, so you have 2 carbons in a row. Then you have another lithium, which will make nitrogen. And then the first hydrogen gets added into that again. So that becomes oxygen. And then the very last hydrogen gets moved into the recycler as waste. So that's why this sequence is important, and how RP0 or RPO gets this output.
Okay. Let's go watch it one last time before we run fast. Nice. I like the geometry of the design, rather than following the suggested output. He makes it all into columns. We'll see that again in other solutions.
Yeah. So overall, it's quite elegant because as many reactors have really straightforward and simple loops, which is really nice, and it's an input speed 1-to-1, so the estimated cycle count is around 4,000.
Well, let's see what
He
that
is a little bit punished by the extra reactors metric, but oh well. Another kind of cute thing to note is he gets some really long trains of trash going into his recycler.
Yeah, there we go. There we are. And here we go. RPO gets 4,020 cycles, close to that 4,000. 4 reactors, no storage tanks, gives them a metric of 4,820. For no points go to the tournament host. He's seen the puzzle already. Anyhow, let's go take a look at the next solution. Next solution is by Flexo, and Giggs is going to explain it to us. Go ahead, Giggs.
So Flexo has a simple algorithm. It's similar to bavarium in that it is a 7-to-8 output-input ratio. It fits in only 2 reactors, which is why it would score theoretically better than RPO's solution, even though it is slower. So it's basically splitting down a Greek to aluminum to make nitrogen and carbon, and then using a separate hydrogen pipe to both fuse hydrogen, make oxygen, and then bond the remaining hydrogens into ethanolamine. So yeah, we can see that in the actual solution.
Here we are. 2 reactors, 2 storage tanks.
Yep. So the first reactors strips down the 7 hydrogens, unbonds them, and sends them into reactor 2. And yeah, we just missed at the beginning, only 1 Greek is split. The rest is all sent for later, but it is all going to be recycled. And before moving on to the second reactor, we see that the first Greek that is split will be split down all the way to nitrogen and carbon after aluminum. So this sends 2 nitrogen-carbon pairs, which is enough to make 1 core of ethanolamine. And yeah,
let's take a look at reactor 2.
Reactor 2. So yeah, this is in the process of assembly. So the core is made from the 2 CN sticks and then hydrogen will get bonded 2 by 2, and then only one final bond, and the last hydrogen is ready on the fuser to make oxygen right here. And so yeah, first we have some trash to take care of. That was mendelevium, antimony, I believe, and manganese that end up being trashed, and the rest is used to make the output. So with this method, you need 8 hydrogen per output, or 320 total. You get 7 per input, so yeah, you need 46 inputs, which means that if this stays at input speed, which it does, you need 4,500 cycles to get the necessary inputs, and then you just have latency left. So in this case, 61 cycles. But on the plus side, it's 2 reactors, so there's no penalty there.
Let's go take a look at it work. Here is the heavy elements building up in the storage tanks, because he has he needs 8 hydrogen, but he only gets 7. So the heavy ones have to wait up. And here we go. And Flexo gets a cycle count of 4561 with just the 2 reactors, so no penalty. He has 2 storage tanks, so he gets a metric of 4567. He gets a score of 3.269, or just over half a point better than the predecessor.
We can have a bit of fun with Flexo's solution. He labeled this solution slow and luck-based, and the luck element is in reactor 2. Yeah, you see this square of bond plus symbols. The reason it's laid out like this is because, well, since the hydrogen pipe isn't actually, well, the timing is always going to be different because it's an uneven output to input ratio, and so I'm guessing Flexo did this huge loop of bond pluses to make sure there was always a bond plus being hit. But yeah, then you can do something I call SpaceChem gambling, or optimization for the lazy. If you pause the solution, you can, well, stop it. You can try and remove one of the bond plus symbols and see if it still works. So yeah, perhaps this one, hit
Nope.
4, doesn't. You undo. I think one of the top ones are definitely not necessary.
Nope. That one's needed. Let's go try this one.
Yeah, speed 4 is better for this.
Oh,
And it works.
Yeah, you can remove you.
Yeah, you can remove quite a few, and actually you can even just have a straight line at the top with the hydrogen sensor. Yeah, see, it works.
Let's try this. No, that one's needed. How about this
Yeah,
one?
if you want, you can even save 2 cycles with this method, then perhaps more, but I just didn't try too much. If you put the hydrogen command, sensor command, at the top right, the very corner.
Here?
Yeah. Okay, you remove everything under it from blue. Just have the, yeah, that arrow pointing left. Fill that row with bond pluses, the top row.
Oh, we're definitely going to need to do, oops, blue.
And then, yeah, you just turn left to input beta. And
Give it a go.
yeah, you can,
Hey,
yeah,
now.
pretty sure this works. And it saves 2 cycles.
Well, let's get
So
rid of these
also-
guys too.
Yeah.
Also, we don't really need you.
Yeah, and the bond plus on that square is also superfluous.
This one?
No, not that one. No, the one below it.
Okay.
So yeah,
Indeed.
Stop, he's already dead.
that's one way to optimize symbols. You just remove one, hit 4, and if it works, yay, you save the symbol.
There
So
you
that's
go.
your tip for week 6.
Okay. Oh, if only that worked for my solution. Thank you very much, Kigs. Here we go. Here's Flexo solution. Now 4559 instead of 4561. 2 cycles faster. Wouldn't have made a big difference. But thank you very much. That was fun. Next solution's by JoJo, and Binky's going to explain it to us.
Yeah, so JoJo has another one-to-one output to input, about as simple as the process can get, given that it's Greeks down to basics. But the splitting is mostly passed out into waste. The only thing that survives the process is a pair of aluminum, which become a pair of carbon, pair of nitrogen, and then one extra hydrogen is split off from a manganese into aluminum, nitrogen, beryllium, helium. That whole process exists to provide one extra hydrogen, which can make nitrogen into oxygen with much less pain than we saw from CursedFlames previously. And so yeah, this is the, I think, expected approach.
Okay, let's go take a look at the expected approach. Here we are.
So all the hydrogens from the input are initially debonded in one specific position, which allows the reactor, which assembles, to have good deterministic knowledge of where and when the hydrogen should be available. Once this loop has run, which is an output hammer, by the way, this looks kind of like a symbol optimized approach, given that it's a cycles puzzle. Then the Greeks are passed along to the second processing reactor, which is another splitter.
Okay, let's go watch that just one more time. Here we are. Not much going on here. And let's go to the next reactor.
And in the splitter, there's this kind of buffet-style splitter arrangement where you just move on up and everything splits, and then you take your pick. The buffet is over the recycler, which allows it to be easy to just get rid of any products you don't care about. And then there's this bouncer with a sensor that gets you the one hydrogen you need. So I think the annotations tell the story pretty well. There's a pair of nitrogen, there's the hydrogen. That carbon is actually 2 carbons. One is output in that position, and then after it is output, another is output in the same position. But that provides you everything you need once you have those early 7 hydrogens to just get it all to work.
There's the 1 carbon.
Also note that the 3 Greeks that are not passed through the splitter buffet will just be sent to the recycler along with all the splitter buffet outputs.
Okay. And let's take a look at the assembly reactor.
Yep. The assembly reactor takes advantage of the fact that all the hydrogen are being passed in the same position except for the one that is coming from reactor 2. But as you can see, the one from reactor 2 lands on the receiving end of a fusion laser, so it's very easy to give that one the special task of being the oxygen.
Okay, here he's making the core. Core made.
And there it fuses, yep. And now the other 7 are all very reliably from the position that the first reactor left in. And all this is a pretty good implementation of a 1-to-1. It does it in only 3 reactors, so it manages to have a metric of 4468, beating out the previous. And yeah, it does still stall a while. It could run faster if it was fewer cycles between inputs, but the design of this puzzle didn't allow that.
Okay. And one more time through, because watching that output's really pretty. Now, how did he avoid putting try to put 2 hydrogens on that oxygen? Let's just take a look at that a moment.
The last hydrogen just doesn't show up.
Oh.
Well,
You can see that there is a 6 counter at the bottom that on the 7th one passes over only a single in beta.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, and the bond limit.
Yeah.
And by 6, I mean 4. Apparently it's a 4 counter.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Counting using flip-flops is an art. There's an Imgur album. I reference it often because I can't devise those myself.
Yeah, we should probably give it a link to that in the description of the video. Anyhow, let's go 3-speed and 4-speed. JoJo gets a cycle count near his 1-to-1 of 4065. He had 1 storage tank, 3 reactors, giving a metric of 4468. He gets a score of 3.425, just a tad better than the predecessor. Next solution's by Anningmay, and Brookie's going to explain it to us.
Yeah, so where do I even start with this? Anningmay has some really complicated nuclear math, and all of this is because of a feedback loop. Essentially, what he does is that he has two reactors, but the second reactor's output is connected to the first reactor's input. Therefore, you can shuttle an atom from the reactor, from the second reactor's output back to the beginning, and well, theoretically, you could do this forever, but the general gist of this diagram, it looks really, really complicated. Because of the feedback loop, you have on the right side, for example, you have a nitrogen fusing into a rhenium to make lead, and it's pointing upwards for once because it's going back into the first reactor. There's also a really strange loop that the on the heavy split of the omega right in the center, slightly to the left, there's a arrow that dips into the second reactor and then comes right back up because it gets split into mendelevium, takes a slight trip into the second reactor, and then comes back. Yeah. But if I were to explain this in as simplest way as I can, essentially what Anningmay is trying to do is he's trying to make germanium and palladium. Now, he does the pretty typical splitting a Greek atom down to nitrogen, and he has two of those. He fuses a manganese into that to get his germanium, and then to get his palladium, he does that really strange thing where he splits one of the two tins into a manganese, adds that to make a rhenium, adds that to a different nitrogen, makes lead, goes to niobium, and then scandium, splits that to scandium and calcium, which is then added up with manganese or iron from a split antimony to the palladium. Why these elements? Because Anningmay actually has, I believe, the only solution that actually splits to get all the central atoms for his ethanolamine. What do I mean by this? Well, germanium will split to sulfur, which will then split to oxygen. There's no fusion required by those splitting commands. Palladium splits down to vanadium, which splits down to manganese on the heavy side, and then that will split down to carbon. So yeah, there is actually no fusion in the last reactor at all, and I believe this is the only one that does this.
Yeah, that's right. I think he uses a fission reactor for that one. He only uses fission reactors. Let's go take a look at his solution.
Or the second reactor is a fusion reactor. It's actually impossible to do this puzzle using only fission reactors, because there's no way to make oxygen.
Sorry, I was looking at the solution. I was misreading it. Let's go take a look at the solution. Oops.
Right, so as Afer mentioned, you can see that there's this line that goes from the bottom of the second reactor that feeds back into the first reactor, and that is essentially the source of all of my pains while trying to do the nuclear math flowchart for this puzzle.
Okay, well, let's go take a look at it work.
Yep. So that omega that gets split down only once into a mendelevium, and that takes a trip all the way around. That's the one that you just saw there. And this one gets split all the way down to nitrogen. And then it'll grab whatever comes back. Remember that it uses to make that one lead from the nitrogen plus 75, which is from tin plus another half of a tin. Splits that once, makes this. There's your scandium and iron, which will get fused to make palladium in the second reactor.
Take a look at that second reactor.
Yeah, so you're going to have to wait a little while for this to reset, but see, here is your rhenium, and that gets fused to make the lead. You have the resulting manganese, which is split into the nitrogen to make your germanium. That's going to become the oxygen later on. And then lastly, you're gonna have the iron. No, those two come first. The calcium and manganese, and that's gonna get added to the iron and scandium to make 2 palladiums each.
Okay, let's go take a look at our third reactor.
Yep. And here you can see all you need to do is just split down and bind them back up together to get your output. So there's the germanium getting split down to oxygen. Right there. And then you have the palladium getting split down to carbon.
And final assembly. Done. One last time. And final assembly. Okay, let's go take a look at this. Look at that feedback loop. Look at that guy going around back. He's confused. Why are you going back?
This is a way to do a one-to-one without needing to split down to hydrogen by doing some really crazy nuclear math.
Love watching this right here. It goes split, 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 split. Everything goes into the trash heap. Let's let it go faster. And faster still. This gives Anningmay a cycle time of 4,036. He had no storage tanks but 3 reactors, giving him a metric of 4436, or a score of 3.537 for just 0.112. Let's go take a look at the previous sidebar. 4436 versus 4468. He just edged out poor JoJo. Here we go. Back to Anningmay's sidebar. Thank you, Anningmay. That's a truly unique and interesting solution. Sorry about that, Brookie.
Yeah, I had to take like 2 or 3 hours for this specific fusion math flowchart, but yeah.
Well, here we go. Next solution's by Zig, and Biggie's going to explain it to us. Go ahead, Biggie.
Yeah, so Zig is our last and best of the 1-to-1 output to input ratio by doing it at very close to minimum latency within 2 reactors. The process is pretty similar to the other 1-to-1s. Fortunately, I didn't have to cover any that were as complicated as Anningmay's. This splits down to aluminum, creates 1 extra hydrogen, fuses that extra hydrogen into a nitrogen to make oxygen in the output reactor, and assembles it all using the original hydrogen.
Wow, that was fast. Let's go take a look at this.
It's kind of a trend when you're going through the list in order that you get all the 1-to-1s in a row. So the process of making 1-to-1 effectively is pretty ingrained in the mind by this point.
And it is simple. It's just 2 reactors. Let's go watch them work. There is our input coming in.
So rather than split off the hydrogens like some of the others that we've seen and create a single feed of hydrogen, Zig splits everything down while keeping the hydrogens bonded, which saves quite a lot of latency in processing in the end.
Okay.
And due to the way that it is structured, it's very easy to grab out 1 hydrogen to send in as the odd one out, and that'll become the well, it's not in the next reactor going to become the fusion hydrogen, actually. That's going to be one of the ones that's already bonded to a nitrogen. But yeah, this setup loop is very straightforward, and it allows for a 1-to-1 in 2 reactors that looks pretty clean.
Okay, and let's go take a look at the next reactor. Here we are.
Oh, that was a close rotate there.
There's also a very novel isomorphic output here that bonds at a skew angle instead of in the columns or in the round shape that is expected. Also, it seems I was mistaken, and the odd one out hydrogen is in fact the fuse target. It's just it spawns on top of the fuser and is the only hydrogen to spawn in that position. So that is the convenient approach. Right.
Here's that
Yeah.
rotate. That's very close.
Oh, that was really close. Now, with only 4 bonders available to this reactor, the bonding that is needed for the left to get the nitrogen out quickly so that it isn't bonded in the wrong place uses up basically all the bonders in the reactor, so there's a path back to go over those again for the final bond. But it's done well enough. There's not any erroneous bonds formed. It's quick and efficient.
Okay. And there's that close one, and there's the fuse to make the oxygen. Boom.
Max bonds prevents anything from happening that is not desired, and we have our output. That is not the shape I would have expected to see passing, but it worked if you do the graph theory.
Okay. There we go. Let's look at this. Very simple design. And 3 speed.
You'll notice that the second reactor does have one thing passed down to the recycler.
And that's the extra nitrogen I remember seeing.
Yep.
Yeah,
There's too much nitrogen if you keep it all bonded, but the nitrogen is there in the beginning to keep the structure.
Yeah,
Oh.
there's 2 nitrogen waste for every output.
That makes sense, because you see 4 among the annotations.
Okay. Yeah, we got 4 nitrogens, and we only need 2 of them. One to make the oxygen, and one to be just the nitrogen. Okay. Well,
but without having an atom there to hold everything together, you have to do a lot more bonding in reactor 2, so it makes total sense.
okay. And Zig gets a cycle time of 3992, just under that 4,000. He had 2 reactors, so there's no reactor penalty, no storage tank penalty, so his metric is 3992 for a score of 3961, or 0.424 better than the predecessor. Next solution's by McCrush at 15th place, and Giggs is going to explain it to us. Go ahead, Giggs.
So you see in the sidebar that there is quite a large improvement in metric with McCrush's solution. They're doing something slightly unusual, is that it's 3-to-1 output-input ratio, but it's actually at 2-to-1 speed, and there's a very specific reason for that. On the right side of the chart, you can see the nuclear flowchart leads to a path that does two outputs, but that particular part of the reaction is at half speed, so it's essentially a 1-1. And then the left half is doing another output, and yeah, that's why it ends up being a bit slower than you'd expect for a 3-to-1 ratio. Yeah, I think we can look at the solution.
Okay, here's the solution. First of all, take a look at all that pipe. Oh boy, that's a lot
Yeah,
of
so
pipe.
that's the half speed part of the solution.
It goes all the way from the first reactor's upper output to the alpha input to this reactor. Let's go take a look at running though.
So that first reactor will unbond all the hydrogen from the input and send it into the final reactor for assembly, so we'll see that later. Then the Greeks, well, 2 of them will get split down to nitrogen, and 2 will be split down to beryllium. And all the fission products go into reactor 2, and we will see right at the end, I think, or did we miss it? Yeah, I'm not sure. There's also an eighth hydrogen that goes into reactor 2. Now we see it now.
Okay.
So yeah, I think we should be following the fission products from the Greek and go into reactor 2. That's what makes the most sense. Well, yeah, that's this one. So we can speed up a bit, I think. It takes quite some time for the products to arrive. So the first fission products, you don't need them in this reaction, so they get recycled. What you do use is the aluminum, like in many solutions. So one pair of aluminum is split down to pair of nitrogen and pair of carbon, and then we get a pair of carbons that all get split down to hydrogen. Some of it is recycled and some of it is sent to the third reactor. So yeah, we can see the process start again, trashing the first 3 pairs of fission products that we don't need, and then using aluminum to make nitrogen carbon, and then carbon to make hydrogen. So yeah, I think you can go into reactor 3 now to see what's going on there. That's the one. So this one is doing an output, and it's doing so from a pair of aluminum and 8 hydrogen. So that's what was going on in reactor 2. And yeah, so that's a first output that gets made. It's not connected to the actual output, but yeah, it's one fully formed one. And it goes straight into reactor 4, which we can go to now.
Okay, well, let's just watch this make one output since we
Oh
missed
yeah,
the
of
beginning.
course.
Made the core. Here's sticking some hydrogen on the outside. And there we go.
And we're done.
Let's go take a look at the assembly reactor. What the heck's going on here?
And so, yeah, in this reactor, there is an actual output assembly. What we had from the first reactor, the nitrogen beryllium core, is upgraded, should we say, to the core of F-nolamine via fusion. I didn't point it out specifically, but in the first reactor, there is outputted in order the nitrogen beryllium core, then 2 heliums and 1 hydrogen. And yeah, as Brookie mentioned in an earlier solution, beryllium and helium make carbon, so that helps with making the core, and the less hydrogen is needed to make the oxygen. So yeah, we are doing the carbons now, and the oxygen was done earlier. And so the hydrogens from this for this output come from the actual input. It's the 7 hydrogen that get unbonded from the pseudo ethanolamine.
Hey, you said it was
so,
3 to 1, but this is obviously 2 to 1 for every output.
Yeah, this is hard coded to be a 2 to 1 reactor. So that's why one of the paths is half speed 2 to 1, which makes it 1 to 1 in the end.
Okay.
If that makes sense. And there's a little quirk in this reactor. Perhaps you can go back to the beginning, stop and restart.
Okay.
Yeah, beginning of the reaction, but in reactor 4, you see that blue is going to make a garbage bowl with the first 7 hydrogens. And yeah, when you can split that up, when we get to hydrogen, it's going to get trashed, and then blue is never going into that that part of the loop again. It's always staying on the other side. So there's a very specific reason for that, and the reason is that it is the way this is set up. You get the hydrogen, and then you get the pseudoethanolamine core. And it's much easier to assemble an output if you first get the core and then the hydrogens.
That's very
And
interesting.
so that's the reason why the first 7 hydrogen are trashed. Unfortunately, it does mean that you need to wait for the next input to get the 7 hydrogens or to make your output. So you need an extra input, which means you need to wait 100 cycles more. And yeah, that could make a difference in the ranking. 100 metric points, you never know.
Okay, well, let's get out of this. Take a look at all that. What are these? These are the carbon and nitrogen? No, these are Mundanifier.
Well, that's fission products from the Greeks, and then aluminum.
That's right. Okay, well, certainly is a
So
very
yeah, A lot of it is trash.
There you go.
I didn't point any out, but there are several extra arrows.
Do we want to find them, or do we want to just move on?
Nah, we can just move on. Just
Let's move on.
we can leave this as an exercise to the viewer.
Okay. Thank you very much, Gigs, and thank you, McCrush. You get 15th place with a metric with 2078 cycles, 2 reactors extras for 4 total reactors and 2 storage tanks, giving you a metric of 2884, or a score of 5.329, or 1.368 better than the predecessor. Let's take a look at that sidebar again. McCrush had a metric of 2884, and Zig had a metric of 3992. It's a huge jump. Nice job, McCrush, for crushing the competition. Next solution's by Blueeyedrat, and Brookie's going to explain it to us. Go ahead, Brookie.
Right, so Blueeyedrat has the second of the 2-to-1 solutions. He takes what I believe to be the most straightforward approach to making a 2-to-1 solution. You split the Greek elements and keep the heavy splits until you get down to aluminum, which allows you to create 2 backbones of N2C2, or cores. And then with the light of the splits, you just keep splitting down until you get to beryllium and split those to get hydrogen. To balance everything, you need to throw away a quarter of the generated hydrogen. So this he obtains 16 hydrogens, 7 from the original input and 9 from the light split side. So the last reactor just bonds everything and fuses to get the output.
Okay, well, let's go take a look at this solution. Here we are. Let's go take a look at this beautiful pipe arrangement. I didn't notice in the diagram waste coming from the output reactor. So let's go take a look at this. Is there something missing, or am I just mistaken?
I think I might be missing something, but we'll see first.
Okay, well, let's go take a look at the solution now. And here we go.
Right, so this reactor is actually severely underloaded. You can see that the cycle count just barely passed 30. Yeah, so at 102, you can see it rotates, like splits once, outputs, splits another time and outputs, and it's barely like 25 or barely 30 cycles have passed, and the entire thing has reset already. So yeah, if you want to speed the solution up, this reactor is a candidate for improvement.
Okay, which one do you want? This one or this one?
Let's go to the bottom reactor.
Okay.
So this reactor splits everything down until he gets to nitrogen and carbon. Or he gets down to the aluminum split, and then he keeps the waste, or he keeps the lighter split from the aluminum, and from this he makes his cores of ethanolamine. Let's take a look at the top reactor. So the top reactor, essentially, well, that's actually the very end of the loop, but essentially what it does is that it takes every input, splits it all the way down to helium, and deposits 3 of the hydrogens, and he'll repeat that with every other input except for the last one, which he just outputs as trash. So if you're counting, that means that he gets 9 hydrogens into the omega output.
There's the trash. Okay, let's go take a look at the last reactor.
So the last reactor, well, you can see even though the top psi output is connected to the recycler, it's not actually used for anything.
Oh, that explains.
Yeah. Um,
Oh, it was just for
so
pretty
that's that.
pipes.
Yeah, so he just bonds everything and fuses to make the output.
Okay, let's go watch that. And this is a 4-to-1? No, this is a 2-to-1?
Yes.
Okay, got it. And let's go watch it one last time. Here we go. Nicely done. And yeah, that's just to make the pretty pipe diagram. Okay. And Blueeyedrat gets a cycle count of 1996, which was a good year, for a metric of 2796, which I hope will be a good year. No storage tanks for reactors to do it. He had 14th place with a score of 5.564, or 0.236 better than his predecessor. Next solution is by Random Element, which is the team of me and Chaboka. And we're going to see how this one works. And boy, I realize now that we made a very interesting and unique solution here. In our first reactor, we take everything, all the Greeks, we trash all the hydrogens, and we take all the Greeks and split them down to manganese, element 25. We did that because we saw element 25 split favorably, and so we just focused on that. We do not care at all about what the input to output ratio was. We just went down to manganese. From there, we split the manganese down to aluminum and magnesium, and we split the magnesium down to carbon, lithium, and helium. Our third reactor is where we make corners of the output, where we take the carbon and make nitrogen, and we excuse me. Well, our third reactor, we make a waste of sulfur, which is the extra from. We take 2 manganese from our second reactor to make our corners for the output, and there's an extra 16 from 34 of the output atomic units, and so we trash that sulfur, and that's right. 1 carbon goes into that sulfur, as does let's go take a look at it. We got our assembly reactor in the end, which does the fusing of the hydrogen into the oxygen. And, well, let's go take a look at our reactors. Here we go. Our first reactor, as promised, just takes the input and gets rid of all the everything that isn't manganese. Drops the manganese right here. And as you can see, very soon this is going to back up. Backed up already. And we can see our pipe here is backed up. Our first reactor is far too efficient for its own good. Our second reactor takes the manganese and splits it down to nitrogen, carbon, and some lithium. The lithium is going to end up as waste. Part of the lithium goes upstairs to the psi output and gets output as hydrogen, and part just goes into the omega output for reactor number 3. Reactor number 3 here. We're starting to make corners. Corners are going to be made into an output. Let's just start this over again. And here's our first nitrogen coming in. It's going to make 1 corner out of that. Now here comes our trash ball coming in. Hydrogen, a carbon. Going to add another carbon, I believe. Make aluminum. Going to add the lithium. There's our sulfur trash ball coming out. And now we're going to start making more corners. Another corner of nitrogen. Another corner with carbon. And red's going to make another corner with another carbon. And here's our trash ball being made again. And more nitrogen corner, another carbon corner. Let's go take a look at our assembly reactor. Our assembly reactor caught it at the end. It's fairly simple because it already has corners to be already made. It takes one corner with nitrogen in it, another corner with nitrogen in it, another corner with nitrogen in, carbon in it, excuse me, and finally another corner with carbon in it. Rotate that, bond it in the middle, and fuse to make our oxygen and output. Let's go watch this again.
It makes sense since you abstract away so much of the source of each corner that your output per input ratio would be non-integer.
Yeah, I did the math, and this is what we came up with. I really wish I'd done the analysis more like everybody else, but this is what it is. Now, I've got to say, in terms of our development process, we got this down, we got it down. We were really hoping to get it down to below 2,000, but we were stuck at 2030 for the longest time. We put it away to look at the current the week 6 project, and I went and took a nap Monday morning. I was really tired. When I woke up, it was time to look at the solutions. I found that Chaboka had improved our cycle count by about 80, got us below 2,000, which is his goal, which is a fantastic goal, and did a really good job. He made one tiny mistake. Not here. In here. Reactor 2. Chaboka. Ah, there, that's better.
Not the only one, I'm sorry.
Not the only one, I guess. But for full disclosure, I had to do that. I'm sorry, Chaboka. You did fantastic work there. Got us under 2,000. Let's watch it work. And here we go. We got in at 1953. Another good year. And we had 4 reactors, so we paid a price of 800 cycles, but no storage tanks for a metric of 2,753, a score of 5.729, or 0.165 better than Blueeyedrat, who preceded us. Let's go take a look at that sidebar. 2753 for our metric. 2796 for Blueeyedrat's metric. Chaboka saved us 1 place, given us 13th place. Thank you, Chaboka, and there's our solution.
I may. There's something that could be useful in week 6, in the last reactor.
Yes.
Just the fuser, move it 2 rows down, remove the drop, and just get the fuse instead. And
Good.
yeah, perhaps, move it down. Put a pause just before so we can show it.
How do we get it out without the...
The way this works is that the fuse acts as a drop because the atom you're holding is fused.
Well, that reactor was my primary responsibility, so I'll take full credit for that, or full blame. That's really cool. Thank you very much, Gigs. Let's watch that again.
Also the arrow on the blue start. Sorry.
Blue start. Blue start. Oh, God. Again, my fault. Let's get rid of that pause. Actually, let's put the pause back in. And watch that fuse drop. Oh, that's beautiful. Wow. Thank you very much, Gigs. And well, I am humbled. Nicely done. And let's go again to the results screen. 1953, metric of 2753. We just saved us 3 symbols for an even 200. And thank you very much, Gigs. That was very interesting. Next solutions by Counterpoint, and Binky's going to explain it to us. Go ahead, Binky.
Yeah, so in this solution, which was submitted with about an hour to the deadline, as noted by IEEE, who was asking for call for final submission saying Counterpoint still hasn't submitted. Oh wait, I just got it from him. So this solution was created in the last minute, and it is extremely impressive for what it is. It has an 8-to-1 output to input ratio, and it relies on what I consider to be fixed points of the splitting process, which means that even though you can sort of treat the sigma and omega and delta as a random source of very, very heavy elements, there will be some slight deviations on the heavy or the light side, but you can find ones that are going to be the same for each of them. And Counterpoint manages to, you can see that all the way down to a nitrogen/carbon in the second reactor is still ambiguous, but manages to use the fact that at that fixed point, once you split it, the light side is always lithium, and go back to something deterministic from there. On the other side, tin and antimony both have a light split be manganese, and that is how the second reactor gets a deterministic heavy enough source to produce 8-to-1. But yeah, I think it's really interesting that there are some fixed points in this split process that you can kind of abstract away which Greek you're holding and just split it and know that this one and that one will always work, for example.
Okay, well, let's go. Oh, go ahead.
Just before that, I would like to point out that I made a mistake, a little mistake. On the right side, there should be a blue arrow pointing from the aluminum down to the carbon. That is how he's able to make 24 carbon from the 8 magnesium and 8 aluminum. The magnesium will split down to 16 carbon, and the aluminum will add another 8 on top of that, which is how you get 24.
Yeah, that checks out. There's the aluminum there has 8 of them, and it turns into 8 nitrogen. The 8 carbon are missing; they're just present in the other carbon. The arrow is just missing to connect them.
Well, very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brookie.
It still is very, very visually helpful to have these charts. Thank you so much, Brookie.
Oh, they are definitely fantastic. Here we go. Let's take a look at the solution. Here it is.
Yep, with its 3 reactors. We will notice, though, that in the first reactor, there is going to be something that's quite an eyesore, given that you have symbols as a tiebreak nominally. There are symbols that are not even connected to the Waldo path because Counterpoint was working on this at the last minute.
Oh my gosh. What are they doing there? Let's just get rid of them.
Yeah. But submitting something and getting it to IEEE was the priority, and that got Counterpoint points, and actually quite a few points.
Yeah, well,
let's watch it in action.
Let's put them back. Okay, here we are. First
Don't erase history.
No, let's do it as submitted.
Yeah, so because this is an output hammer solution, you never actually get to see the outputs, but the notation is helpful. There's a manganese that's always going to be the output from the top splitter, and then the bottom splitter will be either aluminum or magnesium, and this is a point where it's like one of those fixed point scenarios. It doesn't matter which of the two it is, but 8 times there will be passed manganese and one of the other two, which is going to add up to a little bit more than enough to create one output. So 8 times you can create more than one output. The recycler will make that into 8 times you can produce one output.
Okay, so for each corner, he gets a manganese, aluminum, and a magnesium. Wow.
For each corner, he gets 2, actually, because he recycles the fermium and or mendelevium that comes off from the first split of that Greek.
Oh.
You can see that first split doesn't happen over the recycler output. So.
Oh, you're right.
You get the corner, and then you go back and you grab the fermium, and you get the other pair. That's how it becomes an 8-to-1.
Okay, well, nicely done. Let's go take a look at the second reactor.
In reactor 2, you have the manganese goes through a very predictable split into nitrogen and 3 carbon. We can watch red handle that first. And that is split, yep. Meanwhile, the other element, which could be aluminum or it could be magnesium, gets placed on a splitter, split once for a deterministic carbon, and then split again for a deterministic lithium, while the other piece is just left there on the left side of the splitter to recycle. It could be a beryllium, it could be a lithium, and it really doesn't matter. And I think that's like a really cool feature of this approach to the solution. And he uses so this puzzle becomes a hydrogen generation problem once you're trying to get high output ratios. At an 8-to-1, you need to create an extra well, 8 times 7 minus 7 is 49 hydrogen every time you actually process an input. And being able to do that effectively is no small feat. So having this loop here, which creates 5 hydrogen and a helium, is the way to get that extra bit of atomic mass.
Okay, well, let's take a look at our third and final reactor and look at this backup.
Yeah, everything backs up a bit because of the ability of that output reactor to actually create its outputs is not as fast, but it gets the job done. You'll notice that because it's nitrogen and 3 carbons, you need the helium to be the fusion piece instead of a hydrogen, which is handled remarkably well with one big stick. And Counterpoint chooses to do it via the column isomorphism of this output, which is very beautiful.
Yeah, I agree with
and
that.
does it all with a blue bond hammer, which is, I hope, simplification just made for the sake of getting it done in time. I do tend to view one Waldo hammering solutions as not cycle viable, but I might be wrong with that. This is the bottleneck reactor in terms of speed. Everything that you can see, the storage tanks are there so that this one, when it backs up, isn't causing crashes elsewhere. The inputs are processed every 217 cycles, but the output is every 55, which means that the input is actually being consumed every 440 downstream, so it's twice as slow effectively. Okay. This reactor is the bottleneck by a factor of about 2.
Okay, well, let's take a look at one more output be made, and we'll go out of the reactor. Really nicely done.
Yeah, the approach is very slick, and the fact that it is able to be an 8-to-1 ratio is it's a good thought exercise. This solution would be extremely competitive if the input speed was something around. Well, I guess it wouldn't be that competitive at 500 because then 8-to-1 wouldn't be the best breakdown anyway, because we've seen people do higher and higher as we go on.
Oh, really? We've seen more than 8-to-1?
There will be more than 8-to-1. I think Noeuchar is 16-to-1.
Okay, well, let's go get up to Noeuchar in a moment. But let's finish Counterpoint. Let's go take a look at this going.
Because that output reactor is slow, everything gets kind of backed up into it. That's why there are 4 storage tanks there.
Well, let's watch those 4 storage tanks get filled up. And
I think a big pipe maze could save. No, it wouldn't, because the actual latency of when the output reactor gets to start is the big deal.
Okay. Well, Counterpoint gets a cycle count of 2279 with 3 reactors and 6 storage tanks. He gets a metric of 2697, or a score of 5.920, or 0.191 better. Let's take a look at that metric difference. 2697 versus 2753. A lot of these are really close. People really were fighting for every cycle. Really interesting. Next solutions by Astronelson, and they did this. Giggs is going to explain it to us.
So Astronelson labeled their solution No Just No. And while you might think that they were protesting against the puzzle design, which would be perfectly fair, actually they're mentioning their algorithm. They're using Nobelium, element 102. So as you can see on the charts, you get Nobelium from splitting delta. And what's interesting about Nobelium is that, well, the output weight is 34. And if you multiply 34 by 3, you get 102. So that means that if you use a Nobelium and split it down all the way, you can make exactly 3 outputs out of it. And that's what Astronelson is doing in this solution. So let's take a look.
Here's the solution.
So yeah, there's a single pipe going into this recycler, and that's from the first reactor. So everything but a Nobelium is trashed in that reactor, and then absolutely everything is used. And this reactor, well, you can see Blue is on a timing loop, and it's I wanted to point out that it's actually really well made. You can slow down on the next input. A ton of things happen simultaneously and takes advantage of Waldo command order. You can see with the bond minus the bond plus and output. So bond plus first, which means the hydrogens will not get outputted, only the nobelium, and yeah, it
Nice.
also stays in sync the whole time, which is nice. Then we
Yeah.
can follow the nobelium.
Let's watch that one more time.
Yeah, okay.
Because that was really slick. Here's the nobelium.
You unbond it, and then just bond to avoid the hydrogen getting outputted.
Wow.
Since red happens first,
That's nice.
hydrogen is not outputted. So the
Let's see.
second reactor is, I think, my favorite in all the solutions we have today because of the staircase split.
Let's just start this one over again from the beginning.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. So what this is doing is that it's generating 6 aluminums and 2 magnesiums. The magnesium is interesting because it splits into a pair of carbons, and that's how it is detected here. That's how you know you get 2 carbons and not a nitrogen carbon. So the magnesium goes into reactor 3. Goes into reactor 3 and is split all the way to hydrogen.
Let's
Maybe
go
we can
watch this
follow
staircase. All done. Reactor 3.
Yep, so that's the pair of carbons being split all the way down to hydrogen. And all outputs on the same square to make assembly easier in the next reactor.
Next reactor.
So yeah, this one is a bit underwhelming. It's making half of an output. And yeah, you'd rightly expect it to be possible to make a full output in this one and maybe save 400 metric points. But yeah, I think it was Brookie who asked the question to Astronelson about what this was about. And they said that they were on a vacation at the beach with their family and had other things on their minds.
I think it's
Totally
well worth
justified.
it.
Yeah.
Let's go see that made into an output.
So yeah, we have 2 halves, and yeah, one of them has the fuse to make oxygen, and then the other half is just bonded at the bottom. And so we also see the isomorphism we've seen a few times for the outputs. So yeah, I really like this solution because, well, the title and the algorithm are pretty clever. There's also that staircase reactor that is really aesthetically pleasing. And, well, it could have scored better with only 4 reactors, but, you know, things happen.
Yeah, hope it was a nice vacation. And a little faster. And this gives Astronelson a metric of cycle count of 1417. With 5 reactors, unfortunately, gives him his metric of 2617. Score of 6.162 and 11th place.
I should mention that this is pretty low latency for a free one because, well, no, it's not. Yeah, it's decently low latency. You need you have the last input you need on cycle 1300, and so this is only about 100 or so cycles later. So it's pretty good for a free one at input speed.
Nice. Well, top 10 comes next. Let's go get to it. In 10th place, we have ToughTought solution, and Brookie's going to explain it to us.
Right, so firstly, congratulations to ToughTought for obtaining the fastest solution in this week's puzzle, even though the severe reactor penalty caused him to not place as well. So ToughTought has a below input speed 6-to-1 solution. It's only slightly below input speed. At 20 cycles per output, that actually ends up being 120 cycles per 6 outputs. is below input speed because you can see him build up waste in storage tanks. So his algorithm here, his first reactor actually does a lot of work, splitting all the way down to beryllium and lithium. That is used in another reactor to make hydrogen. The other fission products are used to make aluminum, to make the nitrogen carbon, and it's all fused in the very last reactor to make ethanolamine. There's a very small slit kind of towards the bottom right side where it doesn't look like a reactor's doing much at all. But again, as mentioned earlier, these diagrams don't do a very good job of indicating bonding, and that reactor there is actually used to bond everything together. So this is because if you gave the last reactor the task of bonding all of these things, remember, if you're trying to make 6 outputs per 100 cycles, at input speed that would be output every 16 cycles. That means that you're inputting a hydrogen and bonding it for 8 cycles, and then you have another 8 cycles to move your product to the output and reset. Yeah, I don't think you're probably going to be able to move a bunch of nitrogen and carbon, bond that all together, and then do another one of those in just 16 cycles. So, yeah, it's there because if it wasn't, then the last reactor would be completely overloaded.
Okay, well, let's go take a look at the solution. Here it is. Wow.
Yeah.
Boy. Let's go take a look at it. Start.
So the top reactor will essentially, a big part of it just disappears. But the main work that it does is splitting that one tin all the way down to beryllium and lithium.
Okay.
Like that.
And there's some more lithium being made. Beryllium and lithium. More lithium. And we're going to get more lithium.
Yeah, and then it will reset. It does take 100 cycles per input. But he only makes an output every 20 cycles, so the difference is in waste pipes.
Okay, where are we going to next? This reactor?
Let's do that. The bottom reactor is very easy to cover. It just makes hydrogen. So at the very left on blue, you can see there's like a setup loop. That's just to save like a single cycle or so.
Let's watch it.
Because you have input alpha and bond and grab on the very same cycle. It splits all the way down to aluminum and gets you your nitrogen and carbon. That's pretty much all this thing does.
Well, let's watch it go again. Is there a carbon and nitrogen, carbon and nitrogen? Keeps doing that. Okay. Yep. Oops. Here we go. This reactor.
Yeah, so this reactor just takes whatever input you get and just splits it all down to hydrogen. The one thing that you might want to note is that whenever you get beryllium, it actually trashes one hydrogen. So, yeah.
Okay. Let's go here.
So this reactor, as mentioned earlier, only does just bonds the cores of the ethanolamine. It doesn't do anything else.
Let's go watch those cores get made into a product.
Yep.
Wow.
And this reactor just bonds all that. And it works pretty much at full time. Otherwise, again, if you were trying to make those cores in this reactor, it would be overloaded.
Wow. So is any reactor waiting on input besides the first?
The first reactor only waits on an input for like a few cycles, so I wouldn't even call that. But yes, the fourth reactor, the one that makes the ethanolamine cores, is working not at input speed, but it's kind of, you can't really help it. So
Wow. And we can almost let this go at 2 speed, or control 2 speed. It's like a heartbeat. And there we go. ToughTought with our fastest reactor, our fastest solution at 891 cycles. He had, though, 5 reactors and 1 storage tank for a metric of 2094. He gets a score of 7.519, which is a full 1.357 better than the predecessor. Let's go take a look at that sidebar for a moment. 2094 is his metric. Previous metric was 2617. Wow. Nice job, ToughTought, for a very interesting solution. Next solution is for 9th place. It's by Dariush. And Binky's going to explain the solution to us. So let's go, Binky.
Yeah, so this is a remarkable solution in how little of the input it actually uses. You can see that in the waste goes all 7 of the hydrogen and every element except for the delta. The delta, with mass 203, is used to provide 5 outputs, which have total mass of 170. So the delta is reduced down to an aluminum and manganese, I believe.
Yes.
that's magnesium.
Oh, aluminum and magnesium, yeah. Those are the 2 pieces of the delta that end up being waste. Everything else is used effectively into outputs. Problem is that there's extra amount of hydrogen created from this process, because if you actually take 203 minus 170, it doesn't leave the 25 that is thrown into the recycler. It leaves an extra 8 beyond that, which gets stored in a tank that builds up over the course of the reaction.
Okay. Let's go take a look at the solution. Here's the pretty pipe that goes in the storage tank.
Yep, that's the hydrogen generation pipe. You can see all the hydrogen that builds up in there over the course of the solution. So in their first reactor, they do sort of binary split tree here with the delta, where they bond the old one until it's at the proper level. I've seen this as a tactic in a few puzzles before in previous tournaments from videos that I've watched. I don't know the name for it, but it's a very organized way of splitting things without causing the split products to clog up your reactor too hard. And then the hydrogen generation problem, which is the main reason that large numbers to 1 output is difficult on this puzzle.
Okay, well, let's go.
So they very reliably pass magnesium and aluminum in 3 positions into their second reactor. And then you can see what the other notation is. There's this initial input, but with the delta replaced by aluminum, because that's how much it has been split down by the point it gets passed along. In that notation, you can view the magnesium and the input minus the delta as waste. It's really only the aluminum. Those 5 aluminums are the source of actual output.
There it goes. And let's go follow it.
And yeah, you can see that is just as is passed into the reactor to the recycler by blue. Red also passes 1 atom into the recycler. That is the magnesium. But the other 5 aluminum, I guess it is 10 aluminum. The other 10 aluminum split into 26 atomic weight cores of carbon and nitrogen that are placed into a specific location so that the output assembly can be pretty fast. Now, if you watch this, you see that per input, red and blue each drop 1 thing into the recycler, and all the rest of it gets passed as cores, and there are 5 cores created.
Okay.
I had to use pause commands to convince myself of this, because watching this on repeat, it's kind of hard to parse what's happening when.
At least you get that big thing to tell you when it cycles.
Yeah, exactly. The whole input minus the delta plus an aluminum is the flag of this is the next input now.
Right. That's done with 1. Let's go into the final reactor.
So yeah, you got 5 of the cores, and a lot of hydrogen were created And this is actually too much hydrogen, but it's in a reliable set of positions so that Blue can just shuffle it around into this bonder arrangement. And the assembly process is pretty straightforward. It's making it as advertised. It does the fuse at the very end. The main inefficiency of this solution is the fact that it is generating a lot of hydrogen. It's generating too much hydrogen and is devoting a lot of reactor space to generating hydrogen, which slows it down a bit.
And here's
At this point, you can see that the storage tank is starting to reach capacity. It's still safe. It won't crash before 40 outputs, but there's a lot of hydrogen being produced and more than is being consumed.
Oops, let's go watch that again because I want us. And take a look at this pipe. It gets so close to being overfilled. So close to being overfilled. But not
But
quite.
it does crash.
Yep.
And remarkably, 891 with 800 of penalty comparatively is 1 cycle and 1 metric point worse than Dariush. And they both use the storage tank. So they are 1 point apart in the metric, which is the smallest gap I have seen.
Yeah, with this many cycles. Darius gets a cycle count of 1690 with 1 storage tank and 3 reactors for a metric of 2093 and a score of 7.613 or 0.94 better than ToughTought. This is crushing. Let's go take a look at the sidebar. 2093 for Dariush. 2094 for ToughTought. You hate to be there. Nice job, Dariush. 9th place. In 8th place is DariusOne, who's got this solution, and Giggs is going to explain it to us. Go ahead, Giggs.
So last week, Dariush was just 1 place better than DariusOne, and this week it is the reverse. So we continue on the ongoing battle between the Dariuses, always very close, always interesting to watch. And DariusOne is doing something deceptively simple, actually. It's an 8:1 output to input ratio that obviously doesn't stay at input speed. Well, what it's doing is that it's taking an omega, splitting it down into a fermium, and that fermium is split all the way down to 8 nitrogens and 24 carbons. And the reason for that is that's 32 atoms for the backbone or the core of 8 ethanolamine. And meanwhile, with the other Greek elements, the main idea is to split to mendelevium and to get mendelevium and split all the mendelevium down to carbons and get the hydrogens out of it. Everything else, garbage.
Okay,
Let's watch it.
Let's go watch this. Here we are, 3 reactors.
So yeah, the first reactor gets the fermium and sends it. Wait, does it send it or? No, it splits it. Right, sorry. So you get the fermium and then you split that all the way down to nitrogen and carbon or carbon-carbon. And so, yeah, this way you get, as mentioned, 8 nitrogens and 24 carbons. So that's what happens in this first reactor.
And let's let it happen. We can let it happen at 2 speed. And there it is. What's going to happen there? Are they coming down for more action?
Yeah, it's the rest of the fermium.
Oh, well, there you are. Glad we didn't watch that at slow speed. Okay.
So yeah, that's both fermiums processed. And here we see in the second reactor what happens to the mendelevium. So
let's try this over again.
Down.
Sorry.
Yeah. It is split down all the way to carbon. So everything that is not carbon, recycled. And the carbon is then split into hydrogens, all of it. So yeah, essentially this solution very specifically makes the atoms that it will need and uses them to the fullest. To the every atomic weight that's in it. So I found that's really nice.
And here's the third. Love the way he takes the input and then brings it into a regular form.
Yeah, it makes fission a lot easier, a lot quicker. You just have blue going on a split output loop. It's pretty fast. And then what do we do with all this hydrogen? We go to the third reactor where we add it to the carbon, 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 and nitrogen. So yeah, as mentioned before, we make 3 carbons per nitrogen. So we need to actually fuse one of those hydrogens into a carbon to make a second nitrogen, and then fuse another hydrogen into one of the nitrogens to make an oxygen. So yeah, we saw that happen here.
Okay, let's watch this again, slow speeds, because it happens so blindingly fast in its own little way. And there's that nitrogen being made. Okay. Once more. Nice stance.
So yeah.
And what's being stored up in this storage tank? That's the hydrogens. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Really fast. DariusOne clocks in at 1340 cycles with 3 reactors and 1 storage tank for a metric of 1743. He gets a score of 8.977 in 8th place, which is a full 1.364 better than his predecessor. Let's go take a look at this. 1743, 2093. Wow. That represents a difference of score of 1.364. Nicely done, DariusOne. Next solutions by Noeuchar, and Brookie's going to explain it to us. Go ahead, Brookie.
Yeah, so Noeuchar actually has a rather different approach compared to the rest of the playing field. So instead of him actually like separating the Greeks, instead he just splits them all down to a combination of aluminum and magnesium. So why do this? Well, if you look closely at the numbers 201, 202, and 203, and you kept on dividing, eventually you'll get down to aluminum and magnesium. This will guarantee you a lighter split of carbon. The heavier split will, after being split twice, will guarantee you a beryllium, or sorry, the heavier split will also guarantee you a lighter split of lithium. The heavier split of the heavier split, which is beryllium or lithium, that just gets trashed. So he gets rid of all of his randomness that he generates by lumping all the Greeks together by essentially splitting it out. Yeah.
It's the fixed point principle that was in Counterpoint solution as well.
Yes. Anyway, we'll see that his second reactor also generates all his hydrogen needed, and he actually makes a waste ball inside of his a garbage ball inside of his last reactor. And that's how the solution works. Because he trashes beryllium and lithium, he actually has a very high output to input ratio at 16:1. So that's how he doesn't crash due to the waste ball limit of 109.
Is this our only 16:1 output ratio?
I believe so. I'm not entirely sure.
Well, let's go take a look at it. Here it is, a really nice clean 3 reactor solution. Let's go watch it run.
Yeah, so his first reactor splits everything down to just aluminum and magnesium.
Oh, I remember this.
Yes. And he trashes all the hydrogen. Oh, and the timing loop on red up on the upper
that's
right
right.
side, that's actually to delay this solution, because otherwise it builds up way too much. It runs too fast, and it will actually crash because red will split, blue will output, but blue will get stuck on the output, and red will crash into into that corner right there.
Wow. So here's doing nothing. On purpose. There you go. Let's go take a look at Reactor 2.
So Reactor 2 makes a big stick. This allows them to save a lot of time by not having to go all the way over to the by not having to go left and right a whole bunch. Instead, he just inputs, moves it over one, and then processes it over at the output zone. He makes exactly a carbon and 3 hydrogens per every aluminum or magnesium that he obtains. Everything else is trashed.
Let's go watch this stick being formed once. And here we go. Boom, boom, boom. And there we go. And let's go take a look at the output reactor.
Yeah, so the output reactor is actually really simple. Essentially, because of how he splits into this reactor, all he needs to do is input 3 betas, bond plus, and just moves it over by a single tile. The other hydrogens are used to sometimes the last hydrogen up there is used to fuse into the nitrogen. Otherwise, because carbon is one less, it'll be fused into a waste ball.
Okay, let's go watch this waste ball start out. It's empty. With one output being made, he'll have a waste ball of helium. Then he'll get a waste ball of beryllium, and it just marches up 2 per output.
Yep. So at the end of the solution, he will obtain 80 atomic mass over there in this reactor.
Yeah. And I really like this solution. And here's our storage tank. It's getting backed up with this aluminum magnesium, which is why the first reactor has this delay loop. It's just too good.
So if you note, the second reactor runs in an 8-cycle loop, and the last reactor runs in essentially an 8-cycle loop. So if you do the math, that means this solution is doing about 32 cycles per output.
Wow. That's fast. Gives him a cycle count of 1330 for 3 reactors and 1 storage tank, giving him a metric of 1733, giving Noeuchar 7th place and a score of 9.112, or 0.135 better than the predecessor. Next solutions by Team 87 in 6th place, and Giggs is here to explain it to us. Giggs is part of Team 87, so let's go Giggs.
First of all, I've just asked Rezunes if there was anything he wanted me to mention, and he suggested that I blame him for every problem in our solution, so this is out of the way. We thought it would be easy to make the outputs from aluminum, And so yeah, that's essentially what we are doing. We're splitting down the Greeks to aluminum and sometimes magnesium, using aluminum to make nitrogen and carbon, and then building 8 hydrogens from either aluminum or magnesium, and that's why we have this symmetrical graph. We didn't use the hydrogens from the input because we needed 8 per output and we get 7, so yeah, that's way too complicated to work with. Might just as well split down to hydrogen all the way. So yeah, we can just look at the solution. It's a free reactor solution. The first reactor's job is to generate iron and manganese and to trash everything else. So yeah, we get iron and manganese. We get one of those per Greek. Yeah, that's correct. And yeah, that's all this reactor is doing. So in this reactor, we are taking the iron and manganese, and each of those is going to make 1 nitrogen-carbon pair and 4 hydrogens to go with them. So yeah, this reactor runs in a 32-cycle loop, and that's the one that is limiting our solution. It's a 4:1 output to input ratio that doesn't stay at input speed because of this particular reactor. We really try to cram everything in, but yeah, we run out of space for symbols.
Okay, well, let's go take a look at the final reactor.
The final reactor is just the assembly. The way we generate in the second reactor means that we can just input nitrogen and carbon, 2 hydrogens to bond, nitrogen and carbon, and then the remaining hydrogens.
Now you do an output, drop output, so we can't look at the fuse, but it just happens.
Yeah, it's a lot of thing happens. Yeah, we can see on the next cycle, but it's also a simultaneous red fuse, implicit drop, and blue output.
Oh, that's what I was missing when I studied this.
So pause. And yeah, when you hit the fuse, the double bond between the 2 nitrogens will get completely removed. And yeah, you can check the game mechanics page on the SpaceChem Reddit to see how removing bonds works when you are fusing. It's pretty interesting, but basically it starts by bond number and then right, top, left, down, if I remember correctly. So in this case, it works out perfectly.
So here's our fuse, here's our output. Bye-bye.
I think it's right, left, and then top, and then down. But like ever since the
oh yeah, you're right.
But since the input fuse glitch was removed, the left side doesn't really matter anymore.
Yep.
So
that is correct. And yeah, the goal with this solution, we didn't really consider 2 reactor solutions. Well, we should have. But yeah, we thought 3 would be the best approach, and we really wanted to beat any 3:1 ratio solution. And this does it. It's 1311 cycles, and if you do a 3:1, you get the last necessary.
You wanted to be faster than any 3:1, but you didn't win against all the 3:1s.
Yeah, no, I meant a 3:1 in free reactor. As I said, we thought free reactors would be the best, and so yeah, we wanted to beat that.
Well, that's good.
But yeah, you certainly proved us wrong.
And that's what we call foreshadowing in the business. And here we are. Team 87 gets a cycle count of 1311 with 3 reactors, no storage tanks, for a metric of 1711 and 6th place. A score of 9.301, just a little better than the predecessor. Let's go take a look at the metric difference. 1711 versus 1733. Oof, so very close. Nice job, Team 87. In 5th place, we have Team Lazy and Logggy, and Brookie's going to explain it to us. Go ahead, Brookie.
Right, so this solution is a fast 3-to-1 using only 2 reactors, processing an input every 120 cycles. I chose not to give the 40 cycles per output here because the loops actually change size between those 3 outputs, and it also doesn't really account for the extra delay to reset and input a new input. So yeah, the general pathway for this one is actually kind of simple, really. What they do is they split all the way down to antimony. They trash everything else up to that point, and then from the antimony you have the iron to aluminum to the nitrogen and carbon, and that gets you 3 backbones for your ethanolamine. From the manganese, you split down to carbon, and then all of that goes into hydrogen. Of the inputted hydrogens, 6 of them are used to make ethanolamine, which added with the 15 hydrogen from splitting will get you your 21, and 3 of the hydrogens that are made from splitting is fused into the oxygen. And one of those hydrogens from the input is outputted into the waste pipe, or into the recycler. So yeah.
Let's go take a look at the solution. By the way, I should mention that Lazy and Logggy is teamed Lazy Comet and GG Gall. Here we are. There's the solution.
Right. So the first reactor does all of the splitting, because remember that our reactor limits means that we have to do splitting in 1 reactor, and we can only do fusion in 1 reactor as well. So it splits everything down to nitrogen and carbons, and also it takes a single carbon and splits that down to get all the hydrogen that it needs for the output.
Okay, well that was easy. Let's take a look at assembly.
Yeah, so this reactor just assembles everything and fuses to make the output.
And indeed it does. Go watch it from the beginning. There's our core.
And you can see the fusion bond removal rules added again.
All 4 bonds, but where's our fusion coming in? Here's our fusion. Is this where the fusion happens?
Not yet.
No, it can't, because the double bond has to be horizontal.
No, it doesn't. The oxygen has a maximum bond limit of 2, so when it fuses
Oh, okay.
in,
So it removes the horizontal one
removes,
first, but it still has to remove another.
yeah, it removes multiple bonds first.
Before down. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Here's our fuse command, so we can watch it happen. And here it comes.
So we'll remove the double bond with the carbon on top first, and then the right bond bonding it to the nitrogen gets removed second.
Okay. Just watch that again really carefully because it is complicated.
Yeah, so the carbon gets removed first, and then the right side to the second nitrogen gets removed second. Like that.
Wow. Nice job, Lazy Comet and GG Gall.
I'd like to look a little bit at their first reactor and how the delta is removed out of the equation, because they kept it around through the entire disassembly process, and then they nuke it when the other input comes in, I think.
Okay, well, let's go there.
Because, yeah, you see that they grab a corner. At one point, that's going to leave them with nothing.
Right, and they have a special they have a special sensor for sensing delta just for that case.
That's cool that you
Also a
can
whole
sense
bunch of
creeps.
flip-flops too.
There's a delta sensor. It goes
Yeah,
to
and
trash.
that takes up a little bit extra time, but I can see, yeah, that means it's a cycles per input instead of cycles per output, because you have to think about that sort of condition.
Okay. Well, let's go watch this run.
No storage tanks.
No storage tanks. We get a metric cycle count of 1670 and a metric of 1670 with no storage tanks and a score of 9.582, giving Lazy and Logggy 5th place with 0.281 improvement over the previous solution. Next solution's by Biggie Mac, and he's here to explain it to us. Biggie Mac, let's go.
Yeah, so you can see the previous solution by Lazy and Logggy and my solution made the exact same decision in terms of output to input ratio. The implementation is only barely different, and I think Rexkix can switch between the two charts to see it. Look next to the waste at the magnesium and aluminum. In Lazy Loggy's, the aluminum is the waste, and in mine, the magnesium is the waste. Or other way around, sorry. In Lazy Loggy's, the magnesium is the waste, in mine, the aluminum is the waste. But regardless, they're both used for the fact that the second light split from manganese is carbon.
Let's go take a look at it one more time. There we are.
So it is still the exact same idea of keeping the hydrogen bonded to the non-delta Greeks, chucking the delta Greek directly into the waste, and then using antimony's split path to be able to generate 3 cores per input.
Okay. Let's go take a look at the solution itself. Here we are. Let's go
In terms
run.
of the implementation of it, I think the reason I'm winning, of course, is because I had 10 cycles faster per input. And part of that is probably because of the delta getting dropped off as part of the grab input loop. And then there's also just the fact that when you have all the splitting happening in one reactor and it's this much splitting to think about, which commands go over the splitters becomes really important, and whether you can get a split to happen off screen more or less. You can see that the loop blue follows around the bottom and the right is covering all the splitting needed to get antimony down to aluminum. And actually all the way from delta down to aluminum.
Wow.
But the hydrogen generation is red going over a loop while blue hits splits over on, or red hits splits over on the left half of the reactor.
Okay. Almost done breaking down that first input.
When it loops, red grabs the input and then blue picks it up right at the delta and the hydrogen at the top and just carries it. It never stops moving, and blue is able to help out without causing a lot of slowdown, which was a pretty big cycle save on mine, which started at 118 per output and got down to 110 per output.
Nice.
Or per input.
Let's go take a look at that second reactor.
Now, yeah, because of the way that the inputs are ordered in mine, it was pretty straightforward to create a loop that just built this nice circular blob, rotated it for that fusion, and then dropped it off.
Wow.
This went over a couple iterations to get from a 36 cycle loop down to a 34 cycle loop, which was needed to serve the minimum latency for that last output. And yeah, I was really happy to get under 1500. This was designed mostly on Sunday night. I had done a lot of diagramming and understanding of how I wanted to split things before this. But on Sunday night was when I actually started putting symbols into reactors and making this whole work.
Wow.
And then I had a 1600 something and then a 1500 something. And on Monday itself, I got it down to 1500 or sub 1500.
Love that rotate fuse.
Yeah, I again was victim to the fact that you can only break the correct bond if you're fusing the hydrogen that is like it's in the line with the 2 nitrogen and not the one that is in the line with the carbon.
Here's a
So I had to do a rotate. But that worked
fuse.
perfectly. I also want to point out that my solution uses no sinks in either reactor. It
Ooh,
instead uses the fact that everything hammering on an input command waiting for it to show up will release red first and then blue, which allows the timing to be completely deterministic here without syncs.
let's go watch that from the
It
beginning. Go ahead.
also does mean you have a cycle to be saved if you can have red wait on a timing loop and drop output on the same. Oh,
I
I
would
don't
have to
know.
switch photo colors to be able to output after drop on red, and that would not work as then one would be in the other one would be ahead.
That's true.
Yeah, cycle
That's
saving here, I
sad.
looked at it, wasn't trivial.
That's sad.
And here's our input. Here's our other input. Boom, they go. That's really amazing.
Yeah, because it is a 3-to-1, it does 13 inputs to get to 39 outputs, and then it needs that first input. It needs the first output from the 14th input to be minimum latency, which is why I saved a couple cycles when I shortened this.
Okay. Let's go out of this reactor. And already 10.
Yeah, topologically, a 2-reactor solution is the simplest way to do it if you can get it to be competitive. And the reactors penalty meant the 2 reactors solutions were really actually competitive here. I'm glad that this worked out. And fourth is, by quite a large margin, the highest I've placed in any week so far.
Nice. It should be said that, yes, the puzzle design is really great, RPO. We're really enjoying them. I at least am. And the metric design, I think IEEE has a big hand in that. I think they're making these puzzles really interesting. They're very. Here we have a 2-reactor solution. We're going to see later a 3-reactor solution that beats it. It's just really interesting that the way you've balanced the metrics to make trade-offs. It's been very interesting. And here we are. Binky gets a cycle count of 1493 with just 2 reactors, so no penalty, no storage tanks, so a metric of 1493. A score of 10.615, or a full point better than the predecessor. Let's go take a look. 1493 versus 1670. Yow. That's a great job, Biggie Mac. Nicely done.
Thank you, thank you.
In third place, we have brookieoz, who's here to explain his solution. So take it away, Brookie.
Right. So this solution, or the algorithm for this solution, the nuclear math flowchart, it's kind of similar, but instead of a 3-to-1, it's 4-to-1. So instead of throwing away instead of throwing away that delta, essentially what I'm doing is I'm actually splitting that down. I'm also using my hydrogens. I'm using 4 hydrogens, and I'm trashing the rest. So that's 1 hydrogen per every Greek element. Why do I do this? Well, if you split all the way down, that'll get you your backbone, 4 backbones of nitrogen and carbon, and then you'll notice that you'll probably remember that we'll need 8 hydrogens per output. But if I can take 1 hydrogen from the input per every Greek atom, then I only need 7. Why is that important? Well, that means I can just split down a single nitrogen, which is a lot easier to implement than having to double back and split a whole bunch of carbon and grab drop and all that stuff. So yeah, I essentially have my first reactor on split duty down to carbon and nitrogens. My second reactor has duty to make all the hydrogens and bond the backbones, and my third reactor just bonds everything together and fuses.
Well, let's go see this work. Here we go. Yep, 3 straight reactors.
Yeah. So essentially, it's just split an output loop, and red will grab onto the manganese and take that and split it twice, like right there. We'll split once and then twice to get to that nitrogen, and it just outputs all of that. This reactor actually works at a 23 cycle loop, which means it actually stalls on the input for about 4 cycles or so. Yeah. In fact, all of my reactors work in 23 cycle loops. Only this reactor has 2 sinks in it because blue and red need to fix parity, and blue is too far away from any walls, and it doesn't have an atom to hold on to add an extra cycle. So.
Okay, well, let's go take a look at the second reactor.
The second reactor, again, just it bonds everything and splits, or it bonds the backbone together and splits to make all the hydrogens needed. It runs in exactly 23 cycles.
Okay. Let's watch it go for a little bit. That was too fast, Berkey. Okay.
And even optimized symbols by priming that one flip-flop.
Oh, brutal. Okay, let's go take a look at your assembly reactor.
Yeah, so this one again runs in 23 cycle loops. Blue actually input stalls on the beta, and that's how that loop runs in 23 cycles instead of any less. Red has a 23 cycle loop because of that one rotate command, and yeah.
Wow. Wow, there's an input fuse making that oxygen.
And there's you can see red has a sensor there. That's just to that's for when blue is stalled on the beta for an extra like 6 or so cycles or something, because of the input. It's working faster than input speed, so it delays by a little bit. So when that happens, red will take a delay loop. So no sinks involved for this one.
Wow. That's a thing of beauty, Berkey.
Oh, and also drop output at the same cycle.
Is it? I see a drop in an output.
It's once every 4 cycles, actually. It's done to save a single cycle at the very, very end.
Oh, here's another output.
Right. You have to wait until the 16th output to see the next one.
16th output isn't far away.
It's this one. So blue will go down, and it'll drop output at the same cycle. Yeah. So that cost 2 symbols, actually.
But it's not significant because 40 is not a multiple of 16, or is it?
It's a multiple of 4. So if you do this once every 4 inputs, which, I mean, I can actually afford to do this because once every 4 outputs I make, there's that input stall of like 4 cycles or 6 cycles or something. Yeah, so that's how I'm able to get away with it.
Nice. All for 1 cycle.
Yep.
Very impressive, Berkey. Let's take a step out of this reactor. And
and the naming of this solution is actually straight pipes are less than storage tanks, because I actually originally had a storage tank between reactors 1 and 2, and a little bit of a kink in the top pipe of between reactor 2 and 3, just to save 3 cycles of latency.
Well, so they changed the metric and everything's better. Straight pipes are better.
I blame Resumes for this.
Resumes. Okay. Berkey gets clocks in at 1026 cycles with 3 reactors for a metric of 1426, giving him a score of 11.124 and the podium for 3rd place with a 0.509, a full half point better than Biggie Mac. Nice job, Berkey.
I have one more thing to add about this, actually. So I specifically optimized this to be 23, 23, 23 cycles for better latency. I actually had a previous solution working at 23, 22, 22. If the first reactor was optimized to 22 cycles and we had a input speed that was lower, this actually brings the theoretical cycle down to 880 plus latency instead of 1,000 plus latency. And even if I did do something like 23 cycles per output, that would still be 920 plus latency. So when I first made the solution, I was getting very close to saying like, okay, I think I'm getting really close to the computational limits, like the processing power limits of a 3-reactor solution. So I was kind of confident that this was going to place really well, but but this solution is actually limited by input input delays. But we'll see that you can actually make a solution that has all 3 reactors working pretty much full time at below input speed, running at a lower metric than this.
Okay, well, we'll see that in a minute. Thank you, Brookie. Let's get to the results screen. Here we are. The second place solution is by Andy, and Giggs is going to explain it to us. Go ahead, Giggs.
So Andy is in second place with the second fastest solution. And what he's doing is splitting the Greeks down to aluminums to make the backbones of the ethanol. Also splitting the Greeks to magnesium to make hydrogen. So that's essentially the 2 steps taken in his solution. We can see it in action.
Here we go. 3 reactors. Let's take a look at
3
reactor.
reactors. Yep.
Take a look at reactor number 1.
So the annotations are incorrect, actually. In the STI output, all that happens is that 3 aluminum per Greeks will get split down to nitrogen and carbon. So yeah, for 4 Greeks that means 12 nitrogen-carbon pairs, which means 6 outputs, 6-to-1 ratio. It checks out. And in the everything else from the Greek fission will end up going into reactor 2.
Okay, well, let's just watch this last corner get handled.
There you go. 1 aluminum and 2 and 3. And the important thing going into reactor 2 is the magnesium at the top right of output omega. The rest we don't care about.
Okay, well, let's go take a look at reactor 2.
So yeah, reactor 2 is trashing most of what goes in it, as red is showing here. And then the magnesium is grabbed here by blue, and it's going to be split down into 12 hydrogens. So fully split down. And yeah, this is a double pumped, basically. Yeah, basically a double pump in that yeah, blue brings in the magnesium, then we'll process about half of it. Yeah, 1 carbon fully split down to hydrogen, and then red will take care of the other carbon, while blue is going to pick up the following magnesium. So this is making, yeah, 48 hydrogens per input.
Nice. Go take a look at this final reactor.
And this final reactor is the assembly. So we have nitrogen and carbon being brought nicely into the bottom of input alpha, right next to the top of input beta, which has the hydrogens. And this allows for a very quick isomorphism assembly in the form of sticks.
Nice.
With HEH monomer, NH, HNH monomer, and oxygen hydrogen for the last one.
Wow.
And so yeah, this is the approach that Brookie foreshadowed just before. 3 reactors, but under 1,000 cycles because it's not 4-to-1, it's 6-to-1, and then it's not limited to input speed.
Wow. Let's
I
go.
really like Andy's hydrogen generation. It's so consistent and efficient and gets all the hydrogen in the most optimal position for this assembly.
Let's go take a look at that. Yeah, I love the way how it's just the magnesium, and that's all that's kept. Everything else is just thrown in the trash. Boom. Red's splitting it up while blue's getting ready to bring in the next magnesium. Nice. Well, we're already at 17 outputs.
In the second reactor, the way the trash is bonded to make it to the recycler in one trip is really ingenious too.
Yes.
Right here, bond, and you get everything.
And also finding the time to hit that output psi command such that it doesn't accidentally scrap some of your partial magnesium.
Yep.
There's a lot of really good design going on here. I appreciate the solution a lot.
Yeah, and I believe all reactors have a special cased special initiation to make it faster by a couple of cycles. You see here, yeah, blue is stalling, and red has a free input alpha. This is probably to have a first cycle grab by blue.
Let's go watch that. One input alpha. Here's the next input alpha. Oh,
Yep.
that's
Good
beautiful.
grab.
The limiting piece, the hydrogen, make sure you don't waste any cycles.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, here we go. That's fast. 954 cycles. 3 reactors gives Andy a metric of 1354, or a score of 11.710. 586 better, that's 0.586. Notice his 11.710 is just 0.3-ish off the perfect 12. Nice job, Andy. I just mentioned the perfect 12 score, and that's first place held by Sir this week. Brookie's going to explain the diagram. Here we go, Brookie.
Right, so first of all, congratulations to Sir for obtaining first place in this week's puzzle. Sir's diagram, you might note, looks remarkably similar to mine. The only difference is he uses only 2 reactors, but he's running below input speed. However, he handles his hydrogen waste a little bit differently. Instead of trashing it like I do, he actually makes a waste ball in his second reactor. But other than that, our nuclear math flowcharts are actually identical.
Let's go take a look at your nuclear math diagram. Here we are. Fair enough. Biggie's going to explain the solution itself. So, Biggie, here we are. 2 reactors, straight lines, not much to say.
Yeah, so the way that Sir's solution differs from mine necessarily is that they managed to use all of the hydrogen from the input instead of only 6 of them, because they use the delta and they use the hydrogen that's bonded to the delta, and they managed to get 4 outputs per input. And the way that they can get away with it, as Brookie had said, is the same as they had used of splitting up a nitrogen into 7 hydrogens so that you can finish off an output with only a single hydrogen needed, instead of having a carbon split into 6 hydrogens, which I thought was rather easier in terms of the number of commands you need to put on top of splitters. But Sarah very cleanly has, you can watch right here, hydrogen splits, or nitrogen splits into beryllium, 4 hydrogen come out very quickly, and then the lithium comes and splits into the rest. Now there's the question on that output psi of how many actual atoms are going to be created matters, because sometimes there's a sink beneath it for the reason of that output not having a clean tell of how many outputs it's going to make. It might actually always be 3, but that sink exists so that these loops can stay as tight as they need to.
Okay.
And yeah, it passes along 3 definite hydrogens and then 4 hydrogens. And then the question of whether or not there's a hydrogen bonded to the nitrogen in the top annotation is up to whether or not it was the delta, which does have the single hydrogen, or any of the other Greeks, which have 2.
Here's the delta coming in soon, so let's go watch it.
So Sarah definitely made the correct decision in terms of number of reactors, and made a much better decision than me in terms of number of outputs per inputs. The only thing is, to handle 4 outputs per input, you need to have delta still correctly processed into an output, which means that you have a disparity of 1 in number of hydrogens you get to have in your assembly reactor.
Yeah. So the simplest way to do that, I still think, is essentially how Sir and I approached it. Is you preserve at least 4 hydrogens, so you only need to split down nitrogen, and you don't have to muddle about trying to get more hydrogens out of other splits.
Now here's the former delta. Notice there's no hydrogen up here in this cell. And we'll see that in a minute. Let's go into reactor 2.
Yeah, so in this reactor, because there is not a hydrogen there, red grabs empty. And so the fuse loop that red just performed didn't increment the waste ball at all. But in all the other 3 Greek elements, because now taking into account the delta case, you have to generate 7 hydrogen, all the others will have red make this loop and right here grab a waste hydrogen. And it just builds up. It's never going to even exceed 30, let alone 40. Bless you.
Okay, thank you. Here's an output coming out.
So yeah, that waste ball there is never going to be a limit for the solution. It's going to receive 30 hydrogens over the course of 40 outputs. And the assembly process itself is clean. It doesn't slow down the first reactor.
I'm actually kind of curious if it's possible to save on some latency by grabbing onto a different point and then rotating it before drop. I don't know.
That's a thought, yeah. I definitely use that in mind. And after this last bond is made, red could drop 1 tile above that last horizontal, move 2 to the right, grab, rotate, and drop it off. I think it would be earlier. I'm going to open my local copy and see whether that works.
You just might.
Atoms cannot leave the bounds of a reactor.
Oof.
Oh, right, it's the wrong corner. It's uglier than I thought.
Well, let's go look at here. Let's go exit the reactor and watch this thing complete. And we're already at 17 outputs. Oh my.
Yeah, getting a 2-reactor 4-to-1 to work, even if it's slightly sub-input speed, clearly is deserving here of a number 1 place, because that is a very good feat and it's done very cleanly here.
And our last output being made. Let's watch it go out.
The waste here has reached, is that zirconium? Zinc, oh duh.
And there we are. Sir gets 1327 cycles with 2 reactors, so there's no penalty, no storage tank penalty, for a metric of 1327, and a perfect 12.0 score, which is 0.290 better than Andy, who preceded him. Nicely done, sir. Congratulations for first place in this week's SpaceChem tournament. But no SpaceChem tournament video would be complete without having some non-scoring solutions. So here, let's take a look at one from Brookie.
Yeah, so you might notice there's no reactor boundary here. It turns out you can actually make this output with only 1 reactor. So similar to Binky's solution, if you use just a single fusion reactor, you can make all of your outputs using hydrogen. Is it fast? No, not at all. Especially if since this doesn't actually work at input speed. But yeah.
Well,
Let's.
now
Yes.
what's this I see in the sidebar? 36 storage tanks, Brookie. What's that about?
We'll switch to the We'll see when we switch over to the
Okay.
field.
Let's go look at. Oh my God! What have you done?
So the title of the solution is meme solutions don't care about metric because, well, I mean, it's a meme solution. It's not scoring anyway, and also it's kind of to throw shade at the rules change of suddenly adding a 3-cycle penalty to the to using storage tank, which I'm a little bit dismayed of. But anyway, that's just.
Let's take a look at your one reactor.
Yeah, so this is actually, I think, the lowest symbols solution that anyone submitted. I mean, I guess it's kind of to be expected because it's just it's just a single reactor, and I kind of simply optimized this. What it does is red sinks every single hydrogen, debonds and then sinks it, and then blue counts the sinks and with flip-flop logic to determine what to actually make, and then it fuses and outputs. Yeah, it's really that simple. The top left blue, there's like a 12-cycle loop there. That's there to, or it's a 12. It's 10. Sorry, it's a 10-cycle loop there. That's there to essentially. It's like a sensorless logic that essentially moves over the resulting output to bond to the next thing, because using 2 bonders to debond the hydrogens means I have to use only 2 bonders to bond the to make the output. Because there's no hydrogen waste, this is actually a perfect, quote unquote, 7 to 34 output to input ratio. So there's that.
Okay. Well, let's watch one output being made completely. Here we go. Maybe we'll watch it a little faster. There's the nitrogen going out. Here's the hydrogen. Red just serves up hydrogen atoms.
Yeah. There's some neat logic where right after I make a carbon or nitrogen, I use the sensor to actually special case out so that the next atom is always going to be a hydrogen. That way I save on a decent amount of logic space.
Oh, nice. Oh, here's...
Yeah.
Okay. And one more nitrogen. All right, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, and here's your nitrogen. And we're going to assemble it and get ready for our fuse to make our oxygen. I suppose we don't need to make this so dramatic, but it's too late now. There's our fuse,
yeah,
there's our output.
A little bit of a close rotate there, but...
And, well, we don't need to watch it yet. Look at all these unused storage tanks, looking very sad. What you could have done is connected them to the output, to the garbage. Then they would have been a little happier.
I will particle accelerate garbage, but I will not particle accelerate my output.
Can you connect the output of unused storage tanks to the input of other unused storage tanks?
Yes, you can connect the
but you left yourself basically no room for pipes.
Yeah, it's really hard to, but if you connect the last storage tank at the bottom there up to the one storage tank, like 7 tiles above, and then you add a whole bunch of pipe to the end of that, you can actually run it without the recycler.
Oh, that's great.
That is hilarious. Here we go. And running to completion, we get 26,275 cycles, 36 storage tanks, which would give you a metric of something I'm not going to calculate on my head. But thank you.
Something like 26,370 or
394.
something.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, I was wrong. It's 108, not 117. I'm just bad.
It's all right. But wait, there's more. There's another non-scoring solution, this time from Lazy Comet. Let's go, Brookie.
Yeah, so Lazy Comet actually has a faster solve by actually using 2 fusion lasers regularly. He actually does actually has some waste, which I'm a little bit irked of, because you could have easily made this into a 1-5 instead of 1-6. But because it's running pretty much at input speed, it's actually faster than my personal 1 reactor solution. So congrats on that.
Let's go take a look at it. Oh, well, first, here it is, 1 reactor, no storage tanks, Brookie. Let's go in.
Yeah, so you might notice that there's actually no bonders over there, and that's because if you just fuse once, you'll get helium, and helium will break all your bonds anyway.
Is there nitrogen?
Yep. So he actually makes nitrogen, then carbon, then carbon, then nitrogen, and he throws away he throws away a hydrogen every time he makes a carbon, which is sad, because you can actually if you only throw away 1 hydrogen, you can actually make an output in 5 inputs, because that'll get you 35 atomic weight in hydrogen, and your output is 34. So.
And here comes one that's going to use make a nitrogen. There's our nitrogen. Now, how are we going to get some hydrogens on there?
Yeah, so this is where it's special cases, and red has this thing where it just bonds hydrogen 1 by 1 onto the backbone, and then he throws away 3 hydrogens, which makes me really sad.
Aww. AC Comet made Biggie cry. Here we go. And there's our nearly complete. Gotta rotate it, fuse our oxygen, and output.
Yep.
There's our nitrogen coming in, a carbon, another carbon, another nitrogen. There we are. 1/2. Hit the bottom half. There we are. There's our output. And as noted, Lazy Comet waits a fair number of cycles on the input. If this was input was coming in a little faster, he'd have a much faster 1 reactor solution. Really interesting. And let's go at 4 speed so we don't have to wait. Okay, Lazy Comet clocks in at 23,965, no storage tanks, and we give him a metric of 19,965. Yeah, he'd save himself 1 reactor of penalty.
No, it's 400 cycles, not 4,000
Oh,
cycles.
thank you. I can't do math in my head. Oh, well, 22,965. Is that right?
23,565.
Ah, I really can't do math in my head. Oh well. Thank you for bailing me out, Brookie, and let's go see some more solutions. Next solution's by JoJo, and Giggs is going to explain it to us. Go ahead, Giggs.
So, after making a fairly simple scoring solution, JoJo went on a bizarre adventure. This is labeled 2 inputs only. Well, that's technically not accurate. This is really very strange. Brookie had a very hard time making a chart for this because, yeah, well, there are 3 reactors and there's essentially a feedback loop that makes things really complicated.
Yeah, I kind of gave up after like doing the general gist of this because there's a horrendous feedback loop that just keeps on going, and sometimes it makes nitrogen and carbon and it uses it, and sometimes it gets split and then it makes hydrogens. And when it makes the hydrogens, I was just like, I am not going to count the number of times it makes and actually uses the hydrogens for this output, because yeah, no.
Well, let's go take a look at the solution itself. Here it is, and it is a mess. Go ahead, Giggs.
Yeah, that's very true. You can take a look at the first reactor. So when I watched this, I thought, wait, if this is only 2 inputs, what the hell is all this blue mess on the right? Can't you just have the blue Waldo stall on the wall after 2 inputs and be done with it? So that's what I did. I removed all the blue symbols and just had blue parking on the wall, and it crashed. So yeah, JoJo, you're a fraud. This isn't 2 inputs only. But yeah, it's actually two inputs for all the backbones, we should say. The Greeks from 2 input get split, repeatedly split in Reactor 2 with that horrendous feedback loop. And then Blue is going to just send hydrogens down in the first reactor. So yeah, this is the second, and we see that some hydrogen will get sent down. Those hydrogen actually come from the inputs after the second. And when red is grabbing not a hydrogen, it will just split everything, what is it, 4 times? Yep. 1, 2, 3. Oh no, 3 times actually, my bad. And those fission product will go into the next reactor, the third one. And yeah, so we grab what's coming from the second reactor, and if it is not a carbon, we send it back to the second reactor for further splitting. And when we do end up getting a carbon at some point, red is going to grab it and start building the outputs.
Yeah, that happens at like 1,000 or so cycles. It's yeah.
Let's see.
We can probably skip to like 1,500.
Yeah, just until we get something on the screen, and then you can slow down. If I remember correctly, this grabs 3 carbons before grabbing a nitrogen, so you have time. Oh wow, that's actually much slower than I remembered. Just get free speed and then pause when you get something that stays.
Oh my.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 2 carbons, and after, yeah, we just saw that. After getting a third one, red is waiting for nitrogen, and then inputting hydrogens to make the rest of the input. And so, yeah, what happens with this particular setup is that both carbon and nitrogen will get sent back into the second reactor and be further split down into lithium, helium, and hydrogen. And so at some point you will be out of atoms to make the backbone of ethanolamine. So this solution will not run indefinitely. So yeah, it was a bit of a challenge, I guess, for JoJo to make every backbone out of only two inputs, and so they succeeded.
And here we are. All those pipes, all those storage tanks.
Yeah, the reason why he actually needs more than 2 inputs is he needs to get some hydrogen to get kickstarted to kickstart his process. Otherwise, he fills up the world with too much garbage, and he doesn't generate enough hydrogen, and it just stalls.
The issue also is that the hydrogen that is actually generated will not go into the proper pipes. It goes into the pipe that leads to input alpha in the third reactor, and so the hydrogen there would be unusable.
Oh, yeah. Wait. Would it? No, I don't think it would, because the second reactor would sort it and automatically deposit it into beta.
No, wait, because... Wait, show the second reactor again? No, because... Oh, yeah, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. My bad.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so many complications in this. It's kind of a miracle that it even works, honestly.
Well, fraud though it be, it's a very interesting solution, JoJo. Thank you. Let's run it to completion. And there it is. 18,011 cycles with no storage, 11 storage tanks, excuse me. 3 reactors, which would give them a metric of something. And thank you for a very interesting solution, JoJo. So Brookie took it as a challenge from JoJo to actually make a 2-input solution, and here it is, and Brookie's here to explain it to us. Go ahead, Brookie.
Yeah, so anyone who's actually seen the my video actually on 2019's Ascension would know that there is a way to essentially do any fission fusion puzzle. That is, grind everything down to hydrogen. I took inspiration from Saboka from last year's Ascension, where he actually he split everything down to hydrogen and then just fused everything back up to get his outputs. So yeah, there's definitely better ways to do this, but this is probably the simplest way to do it. You might notice that there's a lot of... I didn't go through the whole split fuse or the split path from 200 down to hydrogen because, I mean, yeah. But every input gets you 808 or 814 atomic mass, and if you do the math, well, here's the numbers that come out of it. It's a 407 to 17 output to input ratio, and you get 2,849 hydrogens going divided by 17 going to your output, and a whole bunch of other crazy numbers going to your nitrogen and carbon. That's just what happens.
And how many reactors? Just 2.
Yes, just 2. One splitting reactor that feeds back into itself, and one fusion reactor that just goes to the output.
Well, let's go take a look at this solution. Oh God.
So
more storage tanks,
unlike my first meme solution where all the storage tanks were completely superfluous, This time, I actually need all of those storage tanks, except for 2, which I used to accelerate the output into the fusion reactor. Yeah.
Let's go take a look at Reactor 1. How's it work?
So it inputs debonds 7 hydrogens into Reactor 2, and then it splits the Greek elements to a single corner. It does this a second time, and then it will never run that setup loop ever again. You can see red has now completely ejected from its startup loop and is now hammering split. You'll see why in a second. Well, I guess maybe a little bit more than a second because it takes a while for things to come over. It'll just continue splitting down, testing to see if it has reached hydrogen yet, and then if it does, just drops and outputs, inputs the next one, and does this all over again. Problems with this? The world quickly fills up with garbage.
Let's go take a look at the world. Oh my god.
So if you start running this, the tanks reach max capacity at around 13,000 cycles, by the way. Yeah, it will get there. Remember, every single one of those, except for the 2 that accelerate to the fission, will fill up.
Oh. Let's go take a look at our assembly reactor.
Yeah, so this assembly reactor is actually really, really simple. You're just setting up 1 hydrogen as a seed for the fusion laser, and then you're just making the output a single segment at a time. There's a special case for when it gets to 3 long, so that a blue will hit a fuse, and it'll fuse one of the hydrogens into nitrogen to make the oxygen, and it'll drop output on the same cycle.
Here we are. Oh, I missed it, but that's okay. We don't need to see it.
Yep.
This is some very elaborate nonsense you have made. Congratulations.
It's a hydrogen grinder. I mean, what else? What else can you say? And yeah, you can see there, the entire world is filled with trash now.
But the trash is gradually becoming simpler and simpler.
Yep, and it actually goes down really quickly after this. Because, it...
Just have to wait for all the hydrogens coming in quickly.
Yeah. If I were to actually make a proper 2-input only solution, I would actually... There's actually... I was ruminating about this last night. It's actually really elegant to do a 21-to-1 output to input ratio. All you really need to do is split all your Greek elements down to antimony and tin, which is elements 51 and 50. You'll end up with 7 antimony, and you'll end up with 9 tin. With the 7 hydrogens, you can actually fuse those into your tins to make a stream of 14 antimonies. 51 is actually 1.5 times 34. So if you just did that, then you would have enough mass to create exactly 21 outputs, and you just trash the rest of your tin. So that pathway would be a much more elegant pathway to getting a 2-input only solution working. And if you were actually going to, if IEEE was actually thinking about doing some ridiculous metric like cycles plus like 10,000 times your number of inputs you pull plus or minus 2, then yeah, I would have done something like that.
Well, you did something like this, and thank you very much. Let's just let it run.
It's worth noting that the antimony being the magic number is because it's also exactly half of Nobelium, which was Astronelson's no magic number.
There you go.
All the multiples of 17 and 34 become somewhat magic in this particular output.
And Brookie clocks in at 23,740 cycles with 16 storage tanks and 2 reactors and some metric. Thank you very much, Brookie, and thank you, everybody. Let's get some results going. Hang on a second. Here are the round 5 results for Mundanifier. In 10th place, we have ToughTought. 9th place is Dariush. DariusOne got 8th place. Noeuchar is at 7th, and Team 87 is in 6th. Lazy and Logggy in 5th. Biggie Mac got 4th place, and Brookie got 3rd. Andy got 2nd, and in 1st place was Sir. Congratulations, Sir. Our current standings are here. Oops, there we are. Current standings. Noeuchar stands at 7th place in the tournament. Gigs here is at 9th place. Nice job, Gigs. And Biggie Mac is at 8th place. Wow, nice job, Biggie. ToughTought is at 7th. Razoons is at 6th, who's part of Gigs' team. Dariush is at 5th place. brookieoz is at 4th place. Nice job, Brookie. DariusOne is at 3rd. Sir at 2nd. And Andy is our leader at 1st place. Thank you, everybody, for watching. This has been Rexkix. I've got brookieoz with me, who did all those beautiful charts. Nice job, Brookie. Also have Gigs and Biggie Mac.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for hosting us as well.
It's been my pleasure.
Great.
This has been round 5, SpaceChem Tournament 2020, the results video. Hope to see you again in another video. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.